Please, somebody just broke in our house and shot me.
Okay, are you in St. Paul, sir?
What's the problem?
When I went to the shop, somebody broke into our house. I've been shot.
Wait, you've been shot?
Yes, please.
Okay, stay on the phone with me, okay?
Okay.
What's your name? What is...
No.
Nick?
No.
Nick?
Yeah.
Stay on the phone with me. Who shot you?
I don't know. Somebody broke into our house. No.
Okay, stay on the phone with me, okay? Do not hang up. Nick, listen to me. I've got help coming. I need you to take a deep breath. Is the person that shot you still there?
No, yeah.
Okay, take a deep breath and listen to me. What race was he?
I don't know.
Okay, do you remember what he was wearing? Do you remember what he was wearing?
No, like a hooded sweatshirt.
A hooded sweatshirt?
I don't know.
Okay.
My wife she's dead. I need somebody here now.
Right, we're
Your
getting
wife?
help out there right now. Go ahead, please.
You said your wife is shot also?
Yeah, she's not moving. She's not breathing. Oh, please.
Officers are there, okay?
Ramsey County, where the Mississippi River meets the Great Plains, is a unique blend of urban and rural living. The people of Ramsey County are as diverse as the landscape, each with their own stories to tell. Amongst them was the case of Heidi Firkus, a 25-year-old woman who was found dead in her own house. What followed next was a tale of twists and turns. Heidi Marie Erickson was born on December 14, 1984, to John and Linda Erickson in Ramsey County, Minnesota. Heidi had a devoutly religious upbringing and cherished her time spent with friends, finding joy in the simple pleasures of life. When she met Nicholas Firkus, who was about a year older than her, through her church group, her family was very happy. Heidi, who was passionate about outdoor activities, eagerly anticipated starting a family and becoming a mother. Therefore, she soon married Nicholas and took the name Heidi Firkus. Heidi worked as a Sunday school teacher and was passionate about her faith. She also dedicated her time to numerous mission trips for her local church while earning a living. However, things were about to take a dark turn. Nicholas and his wife Heidi had a quiet evening on April 25, 2010, enjoying a movie and a glass of wine. He went to bed around midnight and woke up to get a glass of water from the bathroom, but heard some noises at the front door around 6 a.m. Admitting that he may have forgotten to lock the deadbolt, he grabbed his shotgun from upstairs and loaded it. He woke up Heidi and urged her to leave the house through the garage as part of a safety plan they discussed previously, and asked her to call the police. Nicholas walked behind her, carrying the shotgun in his left hand and his jeans in his right hand. Heidi stopped by the front door to grab her wallet, and that's when a black man with a dark hooded sweatshirt appeared, and their plans were cut short as the intruder caught up with them and snatched the shotgun from Nicholas. Heidi made a frantic call to 911 at around 6:32 a.m.
State Patrol 911.
Someone's trying to break into my home.
What city are you in, St. Paul?
I'm in St. Paul.
Hang on just a second. What address are you at?
1794.
1794 what?
911, what is your emergency?
Stay with
1794. Minnehaha Avenue.
Minnehaha. Someone's trying west? Somebody's trying to break in her house.
Reporting that someone was trying to break into her home on Minnehaha Avenue West, St. Paul, Ramsey County, Minnesota. Nicholas was fighting off the intruder with a shotgun when it accidentally went off, hitting Heidi. Within seconds, the situation turned deadly as a loud gunshot echoed through the phone line, and the call abruptly ended. And then another bullet hit him. Despite multiple efforts, the 911 dispatch could not connect with Heidi. Just 2 minutes later, they received a call from Nicholas Firkus, Heidi's husband, who seemed clearly distraught and claimed that both he and his wife had been shot by an intruder. The scene that greeted the St. Paul police upon their arrival was one of chaos and tragedy. The front door of the home was left open, and the scent of firearms hung heavy in the air.
grabbed his shotgun and told Heidi to call 911, that as she was on the phone, intruders came in the front door.
Heidi Firkus was lying lifeless on the kitchen floor with blood on her face and hair, while Nicholas Firkus was talking to the 911 operator with an apparent gunshot wound to his upper left leg. The couple's shotgun was discovered on the floor near the front entrance, and the interior of the door showed damage from shotgun pellets. The police immediately called for medical assistance for Nicholas, who was injured in the attack, and tried to piece together what had happened. Nicholas managed to give a brief account of the events.
I started feeling with our doorknob.
The investigation into Heidi's death was quite complicated because the conditions around the case seemed unusual. However, law enforcement continued to investigate Nicholas's involvement in the crime, who blamed a black male with a height of 6'1" or 6'2" for being the intruder who killed his wife. But his statement raised suspicions. He had initially mentioned that he was not aware about the race of the intruder, as he was wearing a dark hood over his face and probably had sunglasses and gloves on. Strangely, despite Nicholas's account of a violent struggle with an intruder just inside the front door, a nearby table remained untouched and undisturbed. Furthermore, the 911 call made by Heidi during the incident did not indicate any struggle, yet the sound of police arriving on the scene can be heard during the second call. The autopsy report was a crucial piece of evidence that contradicted Nicholas Firkus's account of the events leading up to Heidi's death. It showed that Heidi was shot in the back, which was inconsistent with Nicholas's claim that she was in front of him and was shot by the intruder who opened the door. Additionally, there was no exit wound, suggesting that the shotgun was fired at close range. Forensic investigators tested for DNA on the gun and entry door, but no unidentified DNA was found. The trajectory of the gunshot suggests that the shotgun was near the table inside the door, which would have put the intruder in contact with it. However, nothing on the table was disturbed, and there was no sign of a struggle or evidence that an intruder had gained entry into the house during Heidi's 911 call. It was revealed that at the time of Heidi's death, the couple was facing financial troubles with an overdrawn bank account that had been closed by the bank on January 8, 2010, leaving them owing $1,736. Additionally, they had an REI credit card with a large outstanding balance of $17,380, mostly attributed to Nicholas's charges. Nicholas and Heidi bought their home in August 2007 for $215,000 with 2 mortgages. The last payment on both mortgages was made on September 22, 2008, leading to foreclosure. They kept their financial condition from family and friends. Nobody knew that they were getting evicted on April 26, 2010. Heidi and Nicholas went on a 5-day trip to Hawaii on February 12, 2010, the same day eviction proceedings were filed against them, and spent $3,535. They also visited the Calhoun Beach Club on March 10, 2010, where they toured apartments, and the agent recalled Heidi talking about selling their house. But she did not even own a house at that time due to the eviction notice. It seemed like she was not aware of what was actually going on. Heidi sent an email to a friend on March 11, 2010, expressing a desire to move somewhere fun and stating that she wished they weren't tied down to their house. Despite the looming foreclosure eviction, no one in Heidi's inner circle had ever heard her mention anything about it. Photographs and a video taken inside the Firkus home after Heidi's death showed that no packing had been done. Additionally, Heidi was scheduled to work on April 26th, when she had to vacate her house, and she'd not requested the day off. Similarly, there was no evidence that she knew about the cancellation of their home and auto insurance policies. In one of their final email exchanges on Friday, April 23, 2010, Heidi discussed the plans with friends, to which Nicholas responded with a cryptic reply, "Oh, I'm okay with that, as long as I can have you to myself tomorrow night." Even as the months passed by, the detectives remembered Heidi, but Nicholas seemed to be in a mood to hurry on. He met Rachel Watson just a few months after his first wife, Heidi Firkus's death. The couple got married in August 2012 and went on to have 3 children. The investigation into Heidi Firkus's death had been at a standstill for years until a new development arose. Rachel Firkus, Nicholas's second wife, became suspicious of him when she found a notice about unpaid property taxes. Rachel decided to confront Nicholas and secretly recorded their conversations. In one recording, Rachel accused Nicholas of lying and suggested that he may have been involved in Heidi's murder. Their marriage eventually ended in 2018. After a decade-long investigation, Nicholas Firkus was finally accused of murder in May 2021 and subsequently charged with first-degree and second-degree murder of his first wife. Prosecutors believe that 40-year-old Nick killed Heidi out of shame for their financial struggles. On February 10, 2023, he was found guilty by a jury. Peter Erickson, the brother of Heidi Firkus, revealed the devastating impact of the lies and cover-ups that have surrounded this case since the day of her murder.
I really miss my sister, and while I know nothing will replace the void of her not being here, the load is lighter knowing the fight for the truth of her story has been won.
Despite Nicholas Firkus being convicted for her death, closure remained elusive for Heidi's family, who continue to grapple with the aftermath of such a traumatic loss. Heidi's mother, Linda Erickson, said that Nicholas's unthinkable actions ended her daughter's life. Meanwhile, Nicholas maintained his innocence from behind bars at the Minnesota Department of Corrections.
While I understand the jury's verdict and the sentence you must give, I do maintain and will maintain to my dying breath my innocence of this crime.
Even after his conviction, the question still remained, did he kill his own wife? The answers might not be easy to find, but at least the family of Heidi Firkus found some kind of closure. Austin, the state capital of Texas, is a lively city with a population of just under 1 million people. With a crime rate of 41 per 1,000 residents, Austin has one of the highest crime rates in America compared to all communities of all sizes. And it was here that a horrific crime occurred in 2019, when 65-year-old Gloria Lofton was found murdered in her home on Sarah Drive. While not much is known about Gloria's early life, by her 60s, she was a well-beloved figure in her community in Austin. She had 2 daughters, Sonia Houston and Christina Fultz, who she raised in her younger days. By the time she reached her 60s, she'd taken care of multiple children in her neighborhood, and many regarded her as a motherly figure.
I call her an onion. She had a lot of layers, clearly. We find out more and more about her. My mom taught me a lot of things and to be better, to strive for better.
Sergio Rodriguez, who lived across from her, said that Gloria practically raised him on her own after his own mother was murdered when he was just 10 years old.
She was a good lady. She was like a gangster mom, but I needed like a mom figure, and she helped me out.
Living in a low-income neighborhood, there were plenty of people around involved in shady activities and crime, but Gloria always encouraged those who came to her to stay clean, keep out of trouble, and live an honest life. Her impact on the many she helped cannot be understated. By 2019, as she was entering her mid-60s, she began to show signs of aging. She'd received a cancer diagnosis a few years prior, and her health began to deteriorate. However, no one could have expected what would happen to this kind and caring woman in May 2019. On May 9, 2019, 65-year-old Gloria Lofton was found dead in her bedroom in her home on Sarah Drive in Austin. When the authorities were informed and they examined the scene in her body, they initially informed her daughters that her cause of death was undetermined. DNA testing was conducted on the body, and it tested positive for male DNA. The final medical examiner's report was released on July 30, 2019, and in it, the examiner stated that based on observations of Lofton's body, it's possible that she'd been strangled. However, after this, for unknown reasons, perhaps due to a lack of suspects or much other evidence, the investigation died down and the case went cold. A year later, in May 2020, the DNA test that had found male DNA on Gloria's body returned a match in the system. According to police documents, the match was made to Raul Meza, a convicted murderer. But again, for unknown reasons, perhaps because his location at the time was unknown, police did not follow up with Meza, and again, the case went cold. It remained like this until the day of May 24, 2023, when, out of the blue, the Austin police received a call from none other than 62-year-old Raul Meza. On the call, Raul Meza confessed to the murder of 2 individuals. One was an 80-year-old woman named Jessie Fraga, and the other was the 2019 murder of Gloria Lofton. Meza was arrested in North Austin on May 29th by the U.S. Marshals Service Lone Star Fugitive Task Force and the Pflugerville Police Department filed an arrest warrant charging him with capital murder in connection with the homicide investigations of Jesse Fraga and Gloria Lofton. Raul Meza was born in 1960. His involvement in criminal activities traces back to his early adolescence. At the tender age of 15 in 1975, he was convicted for his participation in a convenience store holdup in Austin, where he inflicted harm upon a store clerk.
He knelt me down, took a few steps back, coldly took aim at my back and shot me.
This incident marked the beginning of a long and troubled criminal history, characterized by violent acts and law enforcement encounters. He was sentenced to 20 years for his role in the robbery, but ended up serving a sentence of only 5 years. On January 3, 1982, just months after his release, 21-year-old Raul Meza abducted Kendra Page, a third grader, as she rode her bicycle near her home. He then assaulted and murdered her, and her body was found in a Southeast Austin elementary school dumpster on the very same day. He was arrested and convicted for this crime and was sentenced to 30 years in prison. However, he ended up serving only just 11 years before being released on parole. In 1994, Meza was sent back to prison for parole violation. After that, records show Meza was in and out of prisons and jails for the next 2 decades. In 2019, he was living in a halfway house across the street from Gloria Lofton. It's not known whether he ever interacted with her prior to her death, but it's assumed that he identified her as a target while living as her neighbor. In May 2023, he took the life of his last victim, 80-year-old Jesse Fraga, an ex-probation officer whom authorities have described as Meza's roommate. Fraga was found dead in his closet on May 20th, having been stabbed to death. According to an arrest affidavit, after authorities launched a manhunt for Meza, he called an Austin hotline and told a homicide detective, "My name is Raul Meza, and I think you're looking for me." It was during this call that he also confessed to the murder of Gloria Lofton in 2019.
Meza proceeded to confess to the murder of Jesse Fraga, and he also implicated himself in the murder of a female on Sarah Drive several years earlier.
When Meza was arrested on May 29th, authorities found him with zip ties, duct tape, a flashlight, and a .22 caliber pistol.
He had a bag with him, and in that bag contained zip ties, duct tape, flashlight, and a .22 caliber pistol with additional rounds in that bag.
He also allegedly admitted to planning more murders, showing his true nature as that of a vicious serial killer.
I will let you know that Mr. Meza said he was ready and prepared to kill again, and he was looking forward to it.
Authorities also believe he could be involved in more killings than he's admitting to, and they're currently looking into links between him and as many as 10 unsolved homicides dating to the 1990s. Meza is currently being held and is facing 4 charges, 2 for murder, 1 for capital murder, and another for the unauthorized use of a vehicle. His combined bonds amount to over $3 million. Since the investigation is still active, no date for trial has been set as of yet, and no more details have been released to the public. Sonia Houston, Gloria's daughter, when speaking about the case, was happy that the killer was finally caught.
It was good to have at least some type of closure.
But was also angered at how long it took to do so.
Again, 2020, why am I hearing about it in 2023? Why wasn't I aware or privy to the fact that there was even a rape kit done?
Especially since police had the DNA match from 2020 onwards. Yes, I can fault Raul for his actions every day, all day, but I also have to look at the judicial system that allowed him to be released. I have to look at the detectives who handled my mother's case and closed it with a quickness. If y'all had DNA, why didn't y'all think to question him in 2020? It still doesn't make sense to me, said Houston. Omaha is a vibrant city in Nebraska that offers a unique blend of urban excitement and Midwestern charm. But what really makes this city special are the people who call it home. Known for their friendliness and hospitality, Omahans are down-to-earth and welcoming, creating a sense of community that's hard to find elsewhere. But sometimes, tragedy strikes unexpectedly. The whole community was left reeling when the nude body of 27-year-old Firozeh Dehghanpour was discovered on the River Road near Pigeon Creek, Omaha. Firozeh Dehghanpour was an Iranian national studying in the United States on a student visa. She was on the cusp of graduating with a double major from the University of Nebraska in Omaha. To those who knew her, Firozeh was an extraordinary young woman destined for greatness. She was a religious person with a zeal for life and spent time with friends, enjoying the simple pleasures of life. Firozeh used to welcome Nasir al-Sharif, a friend and neighbor, and his Palestinian brothers into her apartment with open arms. According to al-Sharif, Firozeh was always supportive of people from all backgrounds and was a fierce advocate for justice. She even participated in demonstrations for the rights of the Lebanese and Palestinian people. In addition to her passion for social justice, Firozeh was also a brilliant math student, admired by her professors and peers alike. Whenever Steve Martin, one of her friends, visited her, Firozeh would always prepare Persian tea, a reflection of her hospitable nature. But when everything seemed to be going well, an unexpected incident changed everything. It was around 6:30 p.m. on August 14, 1983, a typical evening for the fishermen who arrived at Pigeon Creek. They were probably expecting a relaxing day of fishing, but as they made their way to the bridge, they saw something under it on the gravel road called the River Road, 4 miles north of Council Bluffs. It was the naked body of Firozeh Dehghanpour. Her throat had been slashed, and she was lying lifeless under the bridge. The police were alerted. When the Pottawatomie County officers arrived at the scene, they realized that the victim was the same person who had been missing from the University of Nebraska at Omaha. As they looked around the area, they found her bra, underwear, blouse, shoes, and glasses strewn haphazardly around her. The area was also scattered with her belongings, as if someone had rifled through her possessions in search of something. Among the scattered items were notebooks, computer papers, a beer can, pens, and a left-handed work glove. The condition of her body was so severe that they immediately needed answers. The preliminary autopsy report only confirmed what everyone had feared. Firozeh had been brutally attacked. According to the Chief Deputy Sheriff, Steve Troge, the autopsy showed that she died from multiple slashes to her throat and 4 stabs to her abdomen. She was also beaten before her death. The investigators concluded that she may have died elsewhere and then been moved to the location where she was found. Blood samples taken from the crime scene were identified as type O, the same blood type as the victim. Additionally, 9 items tested positive for type A human blood, potentially belonging to the killer. Computer papers found at the scene also revealed 4 latent fingerprints, 2 of which did not match Firozeh or the UNO computer consultant who printed them. Omaha police detectives suspected that Firozeh Dehghanpour's killer was likely someone she knew, as her personal belongings and papers were found with her body, suggesting that she may have been lured to the location. It was a valid theory, as there was no evidence to suggest that she was bound or gagged. Officer Gregory Thompson, who was involved in the investigation at the time, expressed his belief that if Firozeh had been attacked by a stranger on the street, she would have dropped her belongings in the struggle. This led investigators to focus on possible suspects who were known to Firozeh, including friends, acquaintances, and classmates. They interviewed her acquaintances and took fingerprints and hair samples from more than 100 students of Middle Eastern descent at the University of Nebraska at Omaha. Her roommate, a Jordanian woman, who shared the apartment at 517 North 88th Plaza with Firozeh, revealed that the last time she'd spoken to her was on the phone on August 13, 1983, the day before her body was found. They were just chatting, and Firozeh seemed happy and carefree, laughing and joking with her friend while she was working in the computer center. They did not discuss how Firozeh would return, as she usually called her friends who used to pick her up. But when Firozeh hadn't called to be picked up from work by 11:45 p.m., her roommate's concern grew. So she decided to go look for her friend herself. It was a rainy night, and the streets were slick and busy. The roommate arrived at the UNO Computer Center shortly after midnight, but Firozeh was nowhere to be found. The roommate and a friend continued their search, scouring the UNO campus for any signs of Firozeh, but to no avail. According to one friend, Parande Kia, Firozeh may have intended to hitch a ride or take a metro area transit bus from UNO to her apartment. However, Firozeh's roommate expressed skepticism that she would have attempted to hitchhike. The roommate said she never hitchhiked. Another friend, who chose not to disclose his name as per police instructions, mentioned that he'd last seen Firozeh on August 13, 1983 at 6:30 p.m. when he drove her to the UNO Computer Center. She'd asked him to pick her up later, but he was unable to return until after midnight, so she told him she'd find another ride home. As the night turned into early morning, Firozeh's friend and roommate grew increasingly worried when she didn't return home. They stayed up until 3 a.m. before finally going to bed. However, when she still hadn't arrived by 8 a.m., they knew that something serious had happened to her. According to the friend, he tried to alert the police that Firozeh might be in trouble, stressing the cultural significance of her not returning home on time. They could have saved her life, he said. A missing person report was eventually filed on the morning of August 14, 1983, by another acquaintance, Abu Dayas Hassan, who lived nearby. Sergeant John Farmer explained that, as per department policy, reports of missing adults are held for 24 hours before investigators take action. After the 24-hour period, the police had to contact the person who made the report to verify that the missing person had not returned before starting the search. Before that could happen, however, her body was found. Firozeh's roommate shared that she'd called Firozeh's family in England to inform them of her death, and they were in turn planning to call Firozeh's parents in Tehran, Iran. However, even after multiple interviews, none of these details led them to a suspect or any significant breakthrough in the case. Two of her friends believed that she may have been abducted as she tried to return to her apartment from the University of Nebraska. There were speculations that the murder might have had political motives due to the political turmoil in Iran at the time. However, some officials rejected this theory. Ms. Kia, the director of International Student Services at UNO, revealed that Firozeh was a member of a leftist Iranian political group called Fadayan, but was not known to be politically active. She was quite reserved when it came to politics, Ms. Kia said. According to her, Firozeh was a quiet individual who was well-liked and had many friends around her. Ultimately, the case caught the attention of the FBI, with Herb Hawkins Jr., the agent in charge of the FBI for Nebraska and Iowa, saying that they were investigating whether a federal kidnapping statute had been violated. One of the main questions was where the killing occurred and whether Firozeh had been alive when she crossed from Nebraska to Iowa. The investigation into Firozeh's disappearance went on for months in 1983, involving multiple agencies. However, the case eventually went cold. Fast forward to November 2020, when the case of Firozeh Dehghanpour was reopened by Pottawatomie County Sheriff's Sergeant Jim Doty after a UNO graduate and her friend Stephen Martin contacted him. Martin had been urging Omaha area law enforcement agencies to investigate the case for years. He urged them to take another look at a previous suspect. Investigators followed up on the lead, but found that the person had a reliable alibi for the night of the disappearance. Despite the lead not panning out, Doty believed that the items collected as evidence in 1983, such as clothing, personal belongings, and a work glove, could be retested with advanced technology. Doty sent 11 items to the Iowa Division of Criminal Investigation Laboratory for DNA testing.
Over the next several months, several agencies worked together to try to find Firozeh's killer. Unfortunately, the case went cold. However, the evidence that was collected in 1983 had been stored and preserved at the sheriff's office in case new information ever came to light.
Crime scene technician Hadley Cava examined the evidence and took one of the samples from a left-handed glove with blood on it that was then put into the National DNA Database. When the results came back in March 2021, investigators were notified that the blood on the glove matched the DNA of a 67-year-old man named Bud Leroy Christensen, who is listed on the national database, Combined DNA Index System, or CODIS, as he had a record of previous offenses in Nebraska. Christensen, a lifetime offender listed on the Nebraska Sex Offender Registry, had a history of multiple crime convictions. He was convicted of first-degree assault in 1972, as well as 2 other assault charges from a 2014 case involving an adult. In the 2014 case, he pleaded guilty to attempted second-degree assault and first-degree false imprisonment and was sentenced to 10 years in prison. He was later released in May 2018 and was living a normal life. On March 24, 2021, authorities received a judge's permission to collect both blood and saliva samples from Christensen while he was at Emmanuel Medical Center. After conducting tests, it was discovered that the suspect has type A blood. After being identified through DNA evidence, Bud Leroy Christensen was arrested on April 30th, 2021 in Omaha, Nebraska, and didn't say a word after being apprehended. Investigators had also compared Christensen's fingerprints with prints on the computer papers found near Dehghanpour's body. The results showed that one of the two remaining prints belonged to Christensen. The probability of finding his DNA profile in a population of unrelated individuals chosen at random was calculated to be less than 1 out of 6.1 octillion. On April 6, 2013, he was sentenced to an indeterminate term of incarceration not to exceed 50 years after pleading guilty to the murder of Firozeh Dehghanpour in accordance with Iowa law at the time. He was being held on a $1 million cash-only bond. His preliminary hearing will occur on May 14th. Officials declined to provide further details on the case, but they did not believe Firozeh and Christensen knew each other. The Pottawatomie County Sheriff's Office expressed gratitude to the law enforcement agencies and crime lab that helped bring closure to her loved ones. Three Rivers is a small city based in St. Joseph County, Michigan. The city derives its name from its geographic layout, as it's the home to the junction of St. Joseph, Rocky, and Portage Rivers. Famous for its Riviera Theater and Covered Bridge Farm, the city attracts a fair amount of tourists for a short getaway. Citizens of Three Rivers enjoy a simple and quiet lifestyle. But this small Michigan town also has a downside. Safer than only 4% of all the cities in the United States, Three Rivers holds a higher spot on the crime rate charts. The chances of a person falling victim to a violent crime are 1 in 101. And sadly, in 1988, this town also became home to Cathy Sue Wartz's tragic end. Born in 1969, Cathy Sue Wartz was brought up in the small town of Three Rivers, Michigan by her parents David Swartz and Audrey Swartz. During her early childhood days, she was a rather quiet and shy girl who grew up to be a fearless teenager. Apart from enjoying hunting, fishing, and camping with her father, Cathy was also an exceptional artist. She always kept in touch with her creative side. By 1988, Cathy was 19 years old and had the reputation of being a bit of a tomboy. She usually kept her hair at medium length and was a good-looking girl. Cathy's mother, Audrey, described her as a kind and gentle person who would never hold back from offering help to others. In the early months of 1988, Cathy gave birth to a girl and named her Courtney. Cathy moved in with her fiancé and her daughter to a riverside townhouse located in Lockport Drive, East Hoffman Street. She became a devoted and loving mother at the age of only 19 years. She enjoyed celebrating tiny milestones and was known for her cheerful vibe. Sadly, Cathy's life was cut short and had an abrupt ending that came too soon. During the cold early morning hours of Friday, December 2nd, 1988, around 5 a.m., Cathy kissed her fiancé goodbye as he left for work. She'd planned to spend the day doing laundry and putting up the Christmas decorations around the house. As soon as her fiancé left, Cathy began her day. That same day, around 3:30 p.m., when Cathy's fiancé returned home from work, he found the red front door to their 2-story apartment slightly ajar. Worried, he entered the apartment and witnessed a nightmarish scene. Almost the entire first floor had been painted red with blood. Cathy's fiancé followed the trail of blood leading upstairs through the foyer. At the end of the blood trail, his eyes met the most tragic sight. Cathy's half-naked body was lying cold on their bedroom floor. The fiancé rushed to the other room to check on baby Courtney. He found her unharmed, playing soundly in her crib. Cathy's fiancé rang up the authorities immediately to inform them of the horrific discovery. Three Rivers Police Department assigned the case to Lieutenant Kenneth Baker, who was assisted by Detective Earl Stark. Mike Money, a rookie cop, described the scene as one of the worst he'd ever seen. Cathy's parents, Audrey and David Swartz, were made aware of the situation. The detectives observed that Cathy's semi-clothed body had multiple stab wounds on her throat and chest. She also had strangulation marks and sign of struggle and self-defense. Cathy was still in her pajamas when her body was found. This made the police believe that she was most probably killed sometime in the early afternoon. When the police detectives further explored the crime scene, they found the words, "I was here," smeared across Cathy's leg and the refrigerator. The killer also left behind a bare footprint in the bathroom and a nearly perfect fingerprint. No trails of blood were found outside the residence, which indicated that the killer had cleaned up or even changed clothes before leaving the crime scene. Since there were no signs of a break-in, the authorities believed that Cathy might have known her killer and let them in through the front door. It was determined that the attack on Cathy began in the kitchen area of the house. A struggle ensued, and Cathy was stabbed. She then made her way to the foyer, the entryway near the front door, before running upstairs and down the hallway to her bedroom, where she was assaulted and killed. A closer examination of the evidence obtained from Cathy's home revealed that there were two types of blood found at the crime scene. One belonged to Cathy, and the other one was probably the killer's. On Saturday, December 3, 1988, an autopsy conducted on Cathy's body in Blodgett Memorial Medical Center in Grand Rapids by pathologist Stephen Cole revealed some intriguing details. The autopsy report concluded that Cathy died because of severe blood loss around 11 a.m. Her throat had been slit, and she'd been stabbed over a dozen times on her upper body. The killer had beaten up and strangled Cathy before slashing her throat. Cathy's body wounds indicated that the killer tried to assault her as she tried to fight back and defend herself. The detectives began interrogating Cathy's neighbors, friends, and family. Audrey, Cathy's mother, recalled that she was at work when she received a call asking her to meet David, Cathy's father, at the police department. She thought that someone might have been in an accident. Audrey put on her coat and walked into Detective Earl Stark's office, where David was crying, holding Courtney in his arms. Audrey was not prepared to accept what had just taken place. She further told detectives that Cathy was a happy and compassionate person. She always kept her doors locked and mostly spent time taking care of Courtney, her daughter. Audrey was also sure that Cathy didn't have any history of drug use, and there was almost no chance that she had any enemies who would do this to her. The day Cathy was murdered, another tragedy struck the town of Three Rivers. At around 12:10 p.m. on December 2, 1988, Christina Shelton, a 24-year-old single mother, drove her car off Schweitzer Road and into St. Joseph River with her 4-year-old daughter, Sarah, seated next to her in the car. Because of the swift currents, it took the rescuers 30 minutes to get Christina and Sarah out of the waters. A couple of hours later, at Three Rivers Area Hospital, Christina passed away, but Sarah, Christina's daughter, was immediately flown to Bronson Methodist Hospital in Kalamazoo, where she surprisingly survived the fatal incident. At first, the detectives thought of it as an accident, as Christina's vehicle veered off the road while making a turn. But what baffled the authorities and the town of Three Rivers was the fact that both Cathy and Christina were residents of the same apartment complex and lived on opposite ends. The detectives soon began to wonder whether the two women knew each other and if there was a connection between their deaths. A witness who saw Christina's car drive into the river claimed that the car wasn't forced off. Neither did it seem like she was fleeing for help. Audrey, Cathy's mother, and Mary Shelton, Christina's mother, claimed that their daughters didn't know each other, and it was highly unlikely that Christina knew anything about Cathy's murder. The owner of the apartment complex where Cathy and Christina lived backed up this claim as well. Deputy Brian Campbell, who was handling Christina Shelton's case, concluded that it still couldn't be determined with certainty why Christina drove her car into the river. But it did seem like Christina's car may have plunged off the road and into the river because Christina was traveling too fast at a curve. Detectives eventually ruled out the suspicion of Cathy and Christina's murder as being connected. After 2 days of investigating and interrogating potential witnesses, on Sunday, December 4th, 1988, the police made their first arrest in connection with Cathy's murder. 18-year-old Troy Daniel Schulthes of Church Drive, a potential suspect, was an ex-boyfriend of Cathy. The police obtained a warrant on Sunday and searched Troy's house inside and out. Troy was taken into custody on suspicion of murdering Cathy. He was held at St. Joseph County Jail and awaited the preliminary exam. From the very beginning, Troy maintained his innocence and denied all the allegations against him. When asked of his whereabouts on the day of Cathy's murder, Troy stated that he was working his partial shift at North American Products, Inc. in Three Rivers from 4 p.m. to 8 p.m. He also said that he attended a high school dance with his girlfriend. Troy's story was supported by multiple witnesses. Troy willingly submitted his blood sample to be tested and compared with the one found at the crime scene. He even took a polygraph test and passed it. On Thursday, December 8, 1988, the results of the blood test came back. Troy's blood wasn't a match with the one found at the crime scene, and it was ascertained that he was not involved in Cathy's death. Still, the police didn't release him from custody. The same afternoon, in a conference held on December 8, 1988, Three Rivers Police Chief James Reifenberg announced a reward of $7,000 and counting to anyone who could provide any information which would lead to the conviction of Cathy's killer. The reward had been contributed by local businesses and individuals. Reifenberg also announced that the police department was in search of a woman who was seen near Cathy's residence around the same time the crime took place. He also stated that the woman they seek was not a suspect, but could have important information regarding the case. Reifenberg described the woman as white, about 22 years old, 5 foot 2 inches tall, and 135 pounds. She had a stocky build, a fair complexion, with a short blonde feather-type hairstyle. A sketch of the woman was released too. When asked about the progress in Cathy's case, Reifenberg said that the investigators had questioned 80 to 100 people and thought the case was solvable. A week later, on Wednesday, December 14, 1988, Troy Schulthes was finally released from custody as the police didn't have any evidence linking him to Cathy's murder. A couple of years later, Troy sued the city and filed a lawsuit in the federal court of Kalamazoo, stating he was improperly searched and arrested and wrongfully imprisoned. Troy said that even though the blood results came back on December 8, 1988, and proved his innocence, he was still held captive for an additional 6 days. By 1991, it had already been 3 years since Cathy's death, and Courtney, Cathy's daughter, had turned into a playful toddler. Courtney had to grow up without knowing the comfort and warmth of a mother's hug. She missed Cathy a lot and would often ask questions about her. Courtney knew that her mother had passed away, but Audrey and David gave her very few details about the incident. They worried about what the right time would be to tell her the truth. When asked about her mother, Courtney would say, "Mummy's up in heaven with baby Jesus." But Audrey and David knew that as Courtney would grow up, more and more tough questions would be asked. The same year, a new team of investigators, led by Lieutenant Tillman Crutchfield, commander of the Michigan State Police, was working on the case. Even after comparing the killer's DNA with Cathy's family, friends, boyfriends, and even ex-boyfriends, and comparing the footprints of 5,000 people with the killer's, there were no matches ever made. The investigators had already contributed about 5,000 hours to the case and followed more than 260 tips regarding the case. Still, they were at a dead end, and the killer's identity remained a mystery. As the years passed, investigation into Cathy's murder lost its pace, and the case went cold. With each passing year, the investigators continued to identify and hunt Cathy's killer. With huge advancements in DNA technology in the early 2000s, the FBI National Center for the Analysis of Violent Crime created a profile for the perpetrator, suggesting that the killer might have lived in the general area and may have known the victim. The Western Michigan University Cold Case Program, which works with the Michigan State Police on cold cases such as Cathy's, assisted investigators in the case. Students from Western Michigan University assisted in scanning and organizing approximately 10,000 documents. The officers then entered the DNA profile into CODES, the Combined DNA Index System. But unfortunately, decades went by without a match. By 2022, solving Cathy's murder case and bringing justice to the Swartz family had become the top priority for the Three Rivers Police Department. The department partnered with the Michigan State Police and decided to utilize forensic genetic genealogy to get to the perpetrator. They submitted forensic DNA evidence from the crime scene to Othram, an American corporation specializing in forensic genealogy to resolve unsolved murders, disappearances, and identification of unidentified decedents or murder victims. Othram scientists used forensic-grade genome sequencing to develop a comprehensive genealogical profile from the DNA of the unknown contributor to the crime scene. Othram's in-house genealogical team used the genealogical profile to produce investigative leads. Othram returned the investigative leads to the Michigan State Police, and they worked with the local agency investigators to continue the investigation. With the help of this technology, the detectives were able to narrow down the suspect pool down to a single family in Beaufort, South Carolina. Assisted by the prosecutor's office, the investigators traveled to South Carolina and interviewed all the family members. Their DNA and footprint samples were collected. And finally, the hard work paid off. One of the family members accurately fit the killer's profile. The suspect was identified as a 53-year-old man named Robert Odell Waters. Robert attended Three Rivers High School as a freshman in 1985. Right after committing Cathy's murder in 1988, Robert moved to St. Joseph County in southwestern Michigan and got married. He and his wife started a plumbing business. At the time of Cathy's murder, Robert must have only been 18 or 19 years old. When the police did a background check, they found that Robert didn't have any previous criminal records. Almost 35 years after Cathy's murder, Roberts was charged with open murder and arrested on April 30th, 2023. He was being held at Beaufort County Detention Center, pending extradition to Michigan to face charges in the murder of Cathy Sue Wartz. But in a more recent turn of events, Robert was mysteriously found dead at Beaufort County Detention Center on Saturday, May 6, 2023. South Carolina Law Enforcement Division spokesperson Renee Wunderlich hasn't publicly released any information about the incident and only stated that the investigation into Robert's death is active and ongoing. Courtney, who herself is a mother now, was saddened by the fact that she couldn't get a chance to look her mother's killer in the eye and confront him, but she was happy that he was identified and a decades-long mystery was solved. While nothing can bring Cathy back and make up for the time Courtney didn't get to spend with her, Courtney was at peace that an age-old question had been answered.
Yeah, probably the worst thing for me is the why. Why? Why did it have to happen like something like that?
She only wished that her grandparents, Audrey and David Swartz, were here to see this day. A Facebook post made by the Three Rivers Police Department shared the news of solving Cathy's case with the world. Courtney thanked them and everyone involved in cracking the case. Sergeant Mike Money, who was one of the first officers to arrive at the crime scene in 1988, also responded to the post. He thanked Earl Stark and Kenneth Baker, two former Three Rivers detectives who were there on day one of Cathy's case and spent countless hours investigating it. Sadly, they too weren't here to see Cathy's killer being put behind bars. He recalled how, even after decades, he was dedicated to the case. Genetic genealogy played an important role in cracking this case. It's a technology that's constantly improving and making great progress. And hopefully, in the future, it will play an important role in solving many more cold cases like this. Do you think that Cathy and Christina's cases were somehow connected? What do you think about Robert's death in the most recent update about the case?
We begin tonight with a major breakthrough in a 6-year-old mystery. Who killed Robert Barron?
In the heart of Old Forge, a small town in Lackawanna County, about 120 miles north of Philadelphia, there was a restaurant that had been a beloved fixture in the community for decades. Old Forge was a place where everyone knew each other's names and stories. And there was one story that everyone knew too well, the story of Robert Barron. Back in 1926, Noni Grandma Giarelli began whipping up the iconic Old Forge-style pizza that filled the stomachs of Italian immigrants working in the local anthracite mines. Various cafes in town added their own twist on the classic recipe over time. Giarelli's Pizza, located at 511 South Main Street, was one of the oldest pizza shops in the hamlet, owned by 58-year-old Robert Barron since 1961. Barron was a hard-working man who poured his heart and soul into the restaurant and even slept in the apartment upstairs to be available for delivery men. By 2017, he'd made it a second home for himself, which he shared with his 55-year-old wife, Maria Barron, and his children too, Robert Barron Jr., or Bobby, 27-year-old Nicole, and 23-year-old Brittany also lived close by. To his family, the restaurant was more than just a business. It was their home away from home. On the night of January 25, 2017, Robert Barron dropped off his son, Bobby, at his apartment in the town. The next morning, Bobby sent his daily text to his father around 7:40 a.m. to pick him up for work, only to be met with silence. Worried, he walked to Gigarelli's and discovered that his father's car, a 2006 silver Hyundai Elantra, was missing, and the morning delivery of supplies was left outside on the sidewalk next to the Bradley Street entrance. After searching the restaurant and the apartment above, Bobby realized that his father was nowhere to be found. Barron Sr. was a man of routine, and his absence was unusual. The family grew increasingly concerned, so Barron Sr.'s wife, Maria, reported his disappearance to Officer David Kimball of Old Forge Police Department at approximately 9:45 a.m. The investigation into Barron's disappearance took a dark turn when Officer Kimball discovered what he believed to be blood at Gigarelli's. The crime scene was immediately established, and the Pennsylvania State Police Forensic Services Unit was called in to assist. They used luminol to uncover evidence of a brutal attack, and it was apparent that the perpetrators had attempted to clean up the blood using household cleaners and a mop left at the scene. A tooth was also discovered at the scene. The search for Barron Sr. intensified, as he was officially declared a missing person and entered into the National Crime Information Center database. The public was asked to help in finding him or his vehicle via local TV stations. Lackawanna County detectives summoned Bobby for an interview and asked him if he knew anyone who had the motive to harm his father. Without hesitation, Bobby responded with the name of his friend and local drug dealer, Justin Schuback. He went on to recount to the detectives how Schuback and his girlfriend unexpectedly visited Gigarelli's about 2 weeks before Barron Sr.'s disappearance. During that visit, Schuback had asked Bobby for a cigarette, and the two had gone outside to smoke. He also revealed that he'd given Schuback $50 on January 25, 2017 to purchase crack cocaine, but Schuback took the money and never returned with the drugs, leaving him ripped off. It was common knowledge that Barron Sr. was not fond of Schuback due to his heroin use. According to one employee, Barron Sr. was known to get quite upset whenever Schuback paid a visit, and he'd often direct his anger towards Bobby. After this lead, the detectives visited the residence of the suspect, Schuback. He confirmed his visit to Gigarelli's, where he ripped off Bobby. Detective Cheryl Turner then requested a preservation request for Schuback's phone number from Verizon Wireless to dig deeper. Days passed. Then, in the early hours of January 29, 2017, around 2 a.m., the silver Hyundai Elantra that Barron Sr. was last seen driving was discovered in front of 136 Howard Street. The front passenger seat of the car was stained with what appeared to be blood, and mud covered the body and tires of the vehicle. The car was promptly towed to the garage area of the Old Forge Police Department, where a search warrant was obtained and the Pennsylvania State Police Forensic Services Unit processed the vehicle. Swabs were taken from various areas, including the steering wheel and the grab handle of the driver's inner door panel. They were sent to the Pennsylvania State Police DNA lab for analysis. Things heated up in the investigation as detectives received the DNA lab report on March 17, 2017. The report revealed that the blood samples collected from Gigarelli's and the passenger side of the car belonged to Barron Sr. But that's not all. There was another twist in the story. DNA from an unknown male was also found on the steering wheel of the vehicle, but the amount was too little to develop a profile. The detectives attempted to speak with Schuback at his residence on 2 occasions, but he refused to answer the door. On one of those occasions, the detectives even saw someone closing a window. They assumed that it was either Justin Schuback himself or his brother Keith Schuback. Detective Lisa Bauer interviewed an eyewitness named Kevin Snyder, who claimed to have seen a silver Hyundai Elantra parked outside his residence on Cornell Street on January 26, 2017, at around 6:45 a.m. Initially, Snyder thought nothing of it, but after seeing news reports about the police searching for a silver Hyundai Elantra with a license plate number starting with the letter J, he realized that the car he saw matched the description. He immediately called his sister-in-law, Kristen Snyder, who lived next door, and asked her if she saw the car parked there that morning. Kristen Snyder, who was off work that day, informed Kevin that when she took the dogs out around 9 a.m., the car was not there. During the investigation, detectives interviewed Courtney Rake, Shubak's live-in girlfriend who resided with him at his mother's house. Rake revealed that on the night of the disappearance, Shubak had told her he was heading to his friend Pat Boyle's house to work on Boyle's mother's car. However, when Shubak still hadn't returned by 11:30, Rake started to worry and contacted Boyle for answers. But Boyle told her that Shubak had left his house much earlier after talking for a few minutes, contradicting Shubak's earlier story. Shubak finally sent Rake a cryptic text message in the early hours of the morning, instructing her not to contact him anymore because he didn't want his phone to go off where he was. When Rake questioned him about it, Shubak brushed it off, saying he'd explain everything when he got home. When Shubak finally arrived home around 3 a.m. on January 26th, Rake noticed that he entered their residence through his bedroom window. Shubak appeared to be out of breath and his shoes were muddy, as if he'd been running outside. When Rake asked him about where he'd been all night, Shubak dismissed her concerns, telling her not to worry about it. After learning all this, the detectives arrived at Shubak's residence on March 30th, 2017 at around 6:30 a.m., armed with 2 search warrants. One warrant was to search the house, and the other was to collect DNA buccal swabs, hair samples, and fingerprints from Shubak. Shubak was actually present at the residence when the detectives arrived, and he was taken to the Dunmore State Police Barracks so they could obtain the necessary samples from him. Then, on April 20th, 2017, Pat Boyle, Shubak's friend, made his way into the Lackawanna County District Attorney's office. He'd struggled with drug addiction and selling, but he managed to turn his life around and was clean from heroin for some time. He believed he had information that could help them solve the disappearance of Barron Sr. Boyle disclosed that he had a history with Shubak, to whom he had sold drugs in the past. He said that Shubak texted him to meet at the UPS store located on Drake's Lane at around 12:25 a.m. on January 26, 2017, where he promised to repay the old debt and buy more drugs. When Shubak arrived, he handed Boyle a large wad of cash that was in a ball and in no certain order. He paid Boyle $60 he owed, plus an extra $180 for more heroin in 20s, 10s, 5s, and $1 bills. But as Boyle counted the cash, he noticed that Shubak had even more money in his pocket. This was odd, as Shubak had not been working at the time. Even if he was, he couldn't have had that much money. Boyle knew that something was amiss and that Shubak was up to no good. Usually, Shubak would hang out and chat with them, but this time he seemed to be hiding something. When Boyle asked him what he was up to, Shubak gave a vague response and quickly left. 45 minutes later, Shubak's girlfriend started calling Boyle every 20 minutes or so, asking about her boyfriend. Finally, she texted him when Shubak came home with muddy shoes. After a few days, Boyle asked him where he was that night, and Shubak told him that he went into the woods to get high. But the story was not believable, to say the least. Boyle revealed that Shubak and Bobby were practically joined at the hip. In fact, Shubak knew some intimate details about the Barron's family life, including the fact that Barron Sr. didn't trust banks and kept his money stashed away in the apartment above Gigarelli's. Boyle explained that he and Shubak learned this information from Bobby himself, who used to take his father's money without permission. Even Boyle's girlfriend, Lori Harris, recalled the same details. On June 14, 2017, the investigation into Barron Sr.'s disappearance took a significant turn as detectives obtained video surveillance footage from Ben Damiano Optical.
Robert Barron went missing. One man is wearing shorts. We are blurring out his face since he has not been charged in connection with Barron's disappearance. In another video clip, another man who is in the shadows appears to be pulling a suitcase.
There are 2 men outside the night of the tragedy, one in a t-shirt and shorts, which tells me that, he ripped off his warm clothes and got rid of them.
The footage, which was recorded on January 26, 2017 at 12:10 a.m., showed Pat Boyle walking from his residence towards the rear of the UPS store. About 2 minutes later, he was seen returning back to his home. Boyle had confirmed it was indeed him in the video on his way to and from the meeting with Shubak. Though the actual meeting between the two men wasn't captured on camera, the footage proved to be a crucial piece of evidence in the investigation. Shubak's cousin, Jason Sistola, shared the same suspicions as others and indicated Shubak's involvement in the disappearance of Barron Sr. He informed them that on January 26, 2017, Shubak purchased an unusually large amount of heroin from him worth $300, which was paid using $5 and $1 bills. But despite all this information, no leads were panning out like the detectives hoped, and the investigation grew more urgent. It started with a $10,000 bounty for any valuable leads, but as desperation grew, so did the reward, skyrocketing to an astonishing $30,000. On June 4, 2018, the detectives apprehended Jason Sistola and his girlfriend, Amanda McCullen, for their alleged involvement in illegal drug activity. Subsequently, during the investigation, Amanda corroborated the information provided by Sistola. The investigators knew who had committed the crime. They needed to build a strong case. So, in September 2018, a search warrant enabled the detectives to look into Shubak's call history. Based on the range-to-tower records, it was determined that Shubak remained in the Old Forge area from the evening of January 25, 2017, until the early morning hours of January 26, 2017, near Gigarelli's. There was no evidence indicating that he left the immediate vicinity during this time period. The detectives then contacted Cybergenetics to create a profile for the DNA obtained from the door panel of the car. In a major breakthrough, on October 24, 2019, a report revealed that the DNA from the door was a match for Shubak's DNA. The discovery accelerated the investigation, and on March 23, 2023, detectives met with Special Agent Michael Sabrick from the FBI's Cellular Analysis Survey Team, CAST Division. Special Agent Sabrick had already tested the investigative area, conducted tower research, and integrated Shubak's range-to-tower data into Google Maps to show the movement of Shubak's phone on January 25, 2017 and onwards. Based on the range-to-tower information from Shubak's cell phone, it appeared that his device was in the vicinity of the wooded area off of Connell Street and in the area of the pole lines by Pagnotti Park between 2:01 a.m. and 2:15 a.m. on January 26, 2017. That was the same area where Barron Sr.'s car was later found abandoned and where Kevin Snyder reported seeing a silver Hyundai Elantra parked on the morning of January 26, 2017. Shubak's device was also in the vicinity of where the car was first abandoned at 2:22 a.m., and then again from 6:26 to 8:26 a.m. on the same day. During an interview on March 24, 2023, Shubak denied ever being inside the car and placed himself in random areas on January 25th and 26, 2017. However, in an interrogation, he admitted to being aware of the cash register upstairs, but denied any involvement. Finally, a breakthrough came when the areas surrounding the pole lines near Pagnotti Park was scoured with trained cadaver dogs from the New York State Police. The dogs proved invaluable when they alerted their handlers to an initial bone, which was later found to be of human origin by the Mercyhurst anthropology team. But that was just the beginning. The search continued, and more bones were discovered, including a femur bone that was sent to the Pennsylvania State Police DNA laboratory for testing. It was a tense wait for the results, but when they finally came back, they confirmed that the femur bone belonged to Barron Sr. On March 31, 2023, 37-year-old Justin Shubak was charged with homicide, robbery, burglary, and abuse of a corpse in connection with the 2017 killing of Barron Sr.
Investigators say Barron appeared to have been beaten to death and that burglary was the motive. His preliminary hearing is set for Monday, April 10th. To see the full affidavit and all of our stories on this case.
The community had been deeply affected by the tragedy, and the impact of the crime was so devastating that Barron Sr.'s family never reopened the pizza place, preferring instead to avoid the premises altogether as a way of coping with their loss. But now, with Shubak behind bars and facing the consequences of his actions, the family can finally begin to find closure and move forward. On a solemn day in 1984, tragedy struck Bradenton, a peaceful town nestled in the U.S. state of Florida. It was here that a 33-year-old Cynthia Ruth Wood, mother of 3, fell victim to a heinous crime. Cynthia Ruth Wood was born in 1951. Not much is known about her early life, but in 1984, she was living in Bradenton and working as a manager at the Cape Vista Child Care Center. At the time, she was also getting a divorce from her husband, Barry Wood, and they were in a custody battle for their 2 children together. Her 3rd child was from a previous marriage, and she was also the stepmother to 20-year-old Denise Kozer, who was Barry's daughter from his previous marriage. She was getting a divorce from Barry as she'd accused him of physically tormenting her, as well as their son from the previous marriage. It was during this rocky period in her life when Cynthia first met Charles Michael Stevens in 1984, who would go on to play a crucial role in her life, although for all the wrong reasons. Stevens and Cynthia met as he used to come to pick up his girlfriend's children from the child care center where Cynthia worked. Stevens chose to befriend Cynthia with a sophisticated scheme in mind, and she was seemingly ignorant of the sinister motives he concealed. At the time, Wood was engaged in a custody battle with her husband, Barry Wood, for their 2 children, who were 3 and 5 in 1984. Stevens, using manipulation and deception, promised to provide information about Barry that could potentially aid Cynthia in her quest to win custody of her children. In June 1984, Stevens invited Cynthia out on a date after earning her trust over time. Cynthia consented, weak from recent changes in her personal life and oblivious to the danger she was unwittingly entering. She had no idea that this seemingly harmless interaction would result in her premature death. On the fateful evening of June 6, 1984, Cynthia and Stevens were last spotted leaving her home. Nobody knew that this would be the last time they would ever see her alive. It was the start of a traumatic journey for Cynthia's loved ones. On June 9th, just 3 days after she was last seen, Cynthia's lifeless body was found in a water-filled ditch in Riverview, Florida. The authorities were informed, and the pursuit of justice began.
The victim's body was found floating in a roadside ditch outside Tampa, Florida. She had been strangled to death.
The body was sent for an autopsy, which confirmed that she'd been strangled, and fingerprints were clearly found on her body. The police knew that Cynthia was last seen with Stevens, but when checked, the fingerprints on Cynthia's body matched a man named Donald Michael Santini. However, in a shocking turn of events, when police looked deeper into Stevens, they realized that Charles Michael Stevens and Donald Michael Santini were the same person. Santini had a checkered past with law enforcement, and it seemed that he'd been using the alias of Stevens to escape his past crimes. Santini's difficult past dates back to 1978, when he was a member of the American Army serving in Frankfurt, Germany. He was facing an assault conviction at the time, which was the beginning of his criminal activities. In 1983, Santini further descended into a life of crime when he committed a robbery at a convenience store in Texas. The seriousness of this act led to a charge of aggravated robbery against him. Shortly after confessing to the crime, Santini disappeared while out on bail, leaving behind a cloud of uncertainty and unresolved legal matters. During his period in hiding, Santini assumed the alias of Charles Michael Stevens. Under this new identity, he resurfaced in Bradenton, where he met and eventually murdered Cynthia Ruth Wood. 6 days after Cynthia's body was found, a woman named Pamela Lynn Kincaid made a shocking confession. She revealed that a man named Charles Michael Stevens, the alias used by Santini, on June 6, 1984, just a day after Cynthia went missing, confessed to taking Cynthia's life. Santini had befriended Pamela and had been living with her before meeting Cynthia. Law enforcement officials now identified Donald Michael Santini as the primary suspect in Cynthia Ruth Wood's murder. Police were positive that Donald Michael Santini killed the 33-year-old Wood, and an arrest warrant was issued in 1984, shortly after the murder. However, Santini had already fled when authorities identified him as the suspect. Despite their best efforts to locate him, they were unable to do so, and with no further leads, the case went cold for many years. In the hearts of those who loved her, Cynthia Ruth Wood's memory lived on for almost 40 years. Her friends and family never lost faith that justice would be served at some point, and that Santini would pay for his wrongdoing. In an unexpected turn of events, in June 2023, 39 years after Cynthia's murder, they finally made the progress that they'd been hoping for. A tip from the Florida Caribbean Regional Fugitive Task Force led U.S. Marshals to Campo, located in southeastern San Diego County, where on June 7, 2023, they arrested Santini, now 65 years old. After eluding capture for almost 4 decades, Santini, the elusive fugitive, was finally apprehended and confined to the San Diego County Jail, pending extradition to Florida. When investigators looked into his past, they found that in the nearly 4 decades since Wood's death, Santini used at least 13 different aliases. When they apprehended him in Campo, he was living under the name Wellman Simmons and was the president of a local community water board. After being extradited to Florida, Santini was denied a request to be released on bail by Judge Catherine Catlin due to his past instances of escaping before facing justice. He'll now be held in jail in Florida until his trial commences. Wood's stepdaughter, Denise Kozer, is now nearly 60 years old. Speaking after the arrest, she said this case has caused total devastation for her family, and she hopes to now finally attain some form of closure. Our next case takes us to Cincinnati, the county seat of Hamilton County in the U.S. state of Ohio. With a population of just over 300,000, it's an illustrious city known for its rich history and cultural diversity. But it was here that a shocking murder took place in December 2010. Robert Jones hailed from Cincinnati, Ohio. Born in 1977, he spent his formative years in a middle-class household within the vibrant Cincinnati community. His parents were devoted individuals who raised him with unwavering moral values. While not much else is known about his life and how it unfolded, in 2010, he was 33 and living in Cincinnati. Life seemed to be going good for him. But little did he know that a nasty surprise was waiting for him just around the corner. December 9th, 2010 seemed like an ordinary day, but the peace was about to be shattered. A little before 8 a.m. that Saturday morning, a motorist who was passing the Hartwell County Club in Cincinnati saw something strange. He saw what appeared to be an unconscious man passed out on the grounds of the country club. Concerned, he called the police to report what he'd seen. Officers from the Cincinnati Police Department responded to the club by 8 a.m., but what they found was not an unconscious man. It was a dead body. Through further investigation, they managed to identify the body as 33-year-old Robert Jones. He'd been shot to death, and when they examined the crime scene, there was very little blood surrounding the body. This led them to believe that he'd not been shot at this location and that the body had been dumped here by his killer to confuse them. However, soon after this, due to a lack of physical evidence and no witnesses as well, the investigation had nowhere to go. For a little over 6 months, the case lay dormant, but then in June 2011, new life was breathed into the investigation. The Hamilton County Municipal Court issued a murder warrant for an individual named Charles Turk, who was now wanted for questioning by the Cincinnati PD for his involvement in the murder of Robert Jones. While the evidence on which this warrant was based was never released to the public, it was finally a lead for investigators to follow. However, to their disappointment, Charles Turk was in the wind, and no matter how hard they looked, they could not find him anywhere. After this, with their main suspect nowhere to be found, the case went cold. The next update in the case took place 5 years later, when, after no luck with their search, the Cincinnati Police Department asked U.S. Marshals' Southern Ohio Fugitive Apprehension Strike Team to assist with their investigation. However, even with the Marshals joining the search, Turk could not be located, and again, the case went cold. It would take another 7 years for the case to reach its resolution, but finally, in 2023, it came to an end. On June 9, 2023, 42-year-old Charles Turk was arrested in Oklahoma City by the U.S. Marshals who'd been searching for him ever since they joined the case.
40-year-old Charles Turk is accused of murdering Robert Jones at the Hartwell Country Club back in December of 2010.
It was learned that he'd been working as a bouncer at a bar in Oklahoma City called the Coyote Ugly Bar for the past 10 years. Police had no idea when he left Cincinnati or how he managed to avoid detection from them for so many years. After his arrest, he was extradited to Hamilton County to face justice. Since it's still an active case, details regarding Turk's motive behind the killing and his relationship with Robert have yet to be released. However, Turk was charged with murder and now awaits his trial to face this charge. He was also charged with tampering of evidence, along with another man named Wayne Dodd, as they both moved Robert's body to try to hinder the police's investigation. On July 10, 2023, Charles Turk pleaded not guilty in court and requested a low bail, but the judge set his bond at $1.1 million. The dates for the trial have yet to be finalized, but hopefully justice will be served to him soon enough. This case takes us to Tallmadge, a city in Summit County, Ohio, United States, with a population of over 18,000. The city is known for its small-town feel, excellent schools, and proximity to major highways, making it an attractive location for both families and businesses. In the year 1952, a little bundle of joy named Karen Bentz entered the world in the charming town of Talmadge. While information about her schooling and family remains a mystery, there's one person who holds cherished memories of Karen, her sister, Sandra Utterbach. Sandra remembers Karen as a typical teenager, radiating joy and enthusiasm in everything she did. One of Karen's greatest passions was dancing, and she found delight in swaying and twirling while carrying out her daily household chores. Karen's lively spirit added a touch of rhythm and grace to even the simplest of tasks. On April 29, 1970, the body of 18-year-old Karen Bentz was discovered lying just off the beaten path of Indian Hills Road in Talmadge. According to the police, Karen had left the safety of her parents' home in Akron on the fateful night of April 28, 1970. Her body was found the next morning, and it was clear that she'd suffered a gruesome fate. She was viciously stabbed 7 or 8 times in the chest alone. In a disturbing twist, an indictment revealed that Karen's body had been cruelly disfigured, suggesting that she may have been subjected to unthinkable torture before her final breath. The small town of Talmadge was on edge after the gruesome murder of Karen Bentz. The investigation into Karen's murder was carried out by the Talmadge Police Department, but there were no results, and the investigation had nothing left to follow up on and eventually went cold. Then, after 5 years, a woman was found slain in a manner identical to Karen's gruesome fate. In the quiet town of Suffield Township, the lifeless body of Loretta Jean Davis was found lying along Congress Lake Road on a fateful September 28th in 1975. The young woman had been viciously stabbed twice in the chest. Her car was found abandoned in front of Talmadge Auto Parts. According to witnesses, Loretta was last seen getting into a car with a man in the neighboring town of Talmadge. Her final hours must have been filled with unimaginable terror as she was attacked and left to die in a desolate spot on the side of the road. The killer's mark was unmistakable. Both women had been stabbed in the chest and discarded like trash. The similarities were too eerie to ignore, and investigators theorized that they could be dealing with a serial killer. His methods were savage, and his motives were unclear. Why did he target these women, and why did he inflict such horrific wounds upon them? No one knew, but everyone feared that he could strike again. The authorities launched an investigation, and the search for the killer of the 2 slain women was a daunting task for investigators. Despite their best efforts, they were unable to uncover any leads that could crack the case wide open. However, the lack of advanced forensic technology at the time made it even more challenging to find any concrete evidence to piece together the puzzle. The investigators were stumped. No clues or leads to follow. No idea who the killer could be. As the days turned to weeks and the weeks to months, the murders of Karen Bentz and Loretta Jean Davis went cold, leaving the community in a state of fear and unease. The cases were forgotten and buried for 37 years, but one man refused to let them go. Captain Doug Bowen of the TPD had retired, but his passion for justice had not. He took it upon himself to reopen the investigations, determined to find answers for the families of the 2 women who were killed in the 1970s. His efforts inspired the Talmadge detectives to join in the search for the truth. In 2013, they dusted off the old files and reopened the investigation into Karen Bentz's death. With the help of cutting-edge forensic technology, investigators delved deeper into the case. They sent the victim's clothing to the pioneering forensic testing company, Othram, and after countless hours of diligent effort, the forensic experts were able to extract a sample of DNA. The DNA evidence was crucial, as it was suspected to belong to the perpetrator of the heinous crimes. The man responsible for the murders of 2 women in the 1970s had finally been identified as Gustav Safaras, a now 78-year-old resident of Jackson Township. With this groundbreaking evidence, the investigators realized that both cases were tied together, as the blood found on both victims' clothing belonged to the same individual. Safaras was arrested and indicted in 2019 for the heinous crimes, but due to the outdated laws of Ohio at the time the murders were committed, he was charged accordingly. This former Goodyear Heights resident, who was living in Jackson Township, was finally brought to justice after decades of eluding law enforcement. As the trial of Gustav Safaras began, the Summit County prosecutors started fighting to present evidence of his past criminal acts. They hoped to convince Judge Allison Breaux that the incidents involving assault and other crimes committed by Safaras on young women were not coincidences, but rather part of a pattern. The prosecutors wanted to introduce the testimony of a woman who was assaulted by Safaras in 1973 and other victims who suffered at his hands. By allowing this evidence, the prosecutors believed that they'd be able to demonstrate Safaras's modus operandi in his previous crimes, which were strikingly similar to the murders he is accused of. A witness, a 68-year-old woman, took to the witness box and bravely testified that she too is a victim of Safaras, the man charged with the murder of 2 women in the 1970s. The woman, who was then 20, recounted how Safaras offered her a ride at a bus stop in Akron in January 1973. However, instead of taking her to her destination, he drove her to a remote location where he tried to assault her. The defense attorneys, Siplin and Will, strongly opposed the admission of these alleged incidents into the trial. They believed that these incidents had no relevance to the murders that Safaras was currently accused of committing. They argued that including these incidents in the trial could unfairly bias the jury against their client. They also contended that the prosecution was trying to use these incidents to paint their client as a dangerous criminal without providing any substantial evidence tying him to the murders. In an effort to demonstrate a pattern of criminal activity by Gustav Safaras, prosecutors Beaumoel and Loprinci also requested permission from Judge Allison Breaux to introduce evidence that spanned across several years. The evidence, dating from January 1972 to October 1976 and August 1991, details a string of criminal activity that the prosecutors argued was relevant to Safaras's current charges. Prosecutors cited several similarities in the crimes committed by the accused. They noted the common traits shared by the victims, young women who were approached by Safaras while they were alone, as well as the similar ways in which they were assaulted. In addition, prosecutors pointed out that the crimes were all carried out using a vehicle and resulted in either stabbing or strangulation. By highlighting these parallels, prosecutors hoped to convince the court that the previous incidents were relevant to the current case and could be admissible as evidence. In a striking similarity, Safaras was accused of strangling and assaulting a woman back in 1972. During the trial, a knife recovered from his vehicle was found to be a match to a piece of a knife discovered near the location where one of the murdered women, Karen Bentz, was left. The case resulted in a hung jury, but the evidence from the past was brought up again, and the stakes were higher than ever before. The defense attorneys, Siplin and Will, asserted that including these unrelated incidents would be an unfair distraction for the jurors, diverting attention from the crimes Safaras is currently being tried for. They further claimed that allowing these incidents to be presented as evidence would violate Safaras's rights, both under state law and the U.S. Constitution. After a long-awaited trial, a grand jury made the historic decision on March 16, 2023, to hold Gustav Safaras accountable for his despicable acts. The jury found him guilty on a multitude of charges, including aggravated murder, murder in both the first and second degrees, and even the horrific act of maiming or disfiguring another. Summit County prosecutor Sherry Babin Walsh released a statement acknowledging the verdict, bringing some semblance of closure to the families and loved ones of Safaras's victims. Gustav Safaras, at the age of 78, was sentenced on April 5, 2023. With a stern expression, Judge Allison Breaux handed down the verdict, 15 years to life for the murder of Karen Bentz, and a life sentence without the possibility of parole for the aggravated murder of Loretta Jean Davis. He's being held at the Summit County Jail on a $2.5 million bond. Judge Allison Breaux did not hold back when it came to the sentencing of Gustav Safaras for his heinous crimes. She made it clear that taking the lives of 2 innocent women, who were someone's daughter, sister, mother, friend, or aunt, without any regard, was the greatest harm possible. Sandra Utterback, the sister of Karen Bentz, appeared virtually during the sentencing hearing and gave a heart-wrenching statement. Utterback expressed her grief and anger over the murder of her sister and the impact it had on her family. She called the killer a monster for stabbing her sister and leaving her outside like garbage. Although she's glad that justice is finally being served, she acknowledged that it will never bring her sister back. After 50 long years, justice has finally been served for the families of Loretta Jean Davis and Karen Bentz, thanks to the relentless efforts of the investigators, prosecutors, and victim advocates involved in the case. Summit County Prosecutor Sherry Bevan Walsh expressed her gratitude towards those who tirelessly worked to bring closure to the families of the victims. This case takes us to Cologne, a city in western Germany located on the Rhine River. With a population of over 1 million people, it's the fourth largest city in Germany. Cologne is known for its beautiful architecture, as well as its rich history dating back to Roman times. It's also a hub for media, business, and tourism, with many attractions such as museums, parks, and a lively nightlife. In a small town, a young single mother named Petra Nohl had a loving home with her parents and her precious 1-year-old daughter. She was going through a separation from her daughter's father, bravely taking on the role of a strong and independent parent. One fateful night, on February 13, 1988, Petra decided to seize the opportunity for some well-deserved fun and joined her friends at the carnival. Excitement filled the air as they explored the colorful rides and indulged in sweet treats, cherishing the carefree moments of joy and laughter. Amidst the vibrant atmosphere of the tourist village known as Beer Village, Petra Nohl embarked on a night of revelry with her close friends. Their chosen destination was the lively club called Charivari, nestled within the bustling mall known as Leidenstadt, now known as Operpassagen. The air was filled with music and laughter as they danced and enjoyed the company of each other. As the clock ticked closer to 4 a.m. on February 14th, Petra's adventurous spirit beckoned her to explore another venue, the famed Big Ben Club. In need of funds for this impromptu adventure, she borrowed 100 Deutschmarks from a friend and set off on her way. Little did they know that this would be the last night Petra would spend with her loved ones. On the day of love and celebration, February 14th, 1988, the streets of Cologne were bustling with excitement as the carnival season was in full swing. But amidst the revelry, a dark and heinous crime had been committed. The lifeless body of a 24-year-old young woman, Petra Nohl, was discovered behind a food takeaway van, shattering the festive mood of the historic Altstadt. Amidst the joyful celebration of the parade, a somber scene unfolded nearby as police officers and forensic experts gathered around Petra Nohl's lifeless body. The evidence of her violent struggle was apparent in the broken nails on her hands, as though she'd clawed and fought to stay alive. The contusions on her neck, imprinted like a macabre necklace, left no doubt that she'd been strangled by someone's bare hands. But the crimson stains on her inner thighs left a baffling mystery to be unraveled, a cryptic clue that would require the expertise of the most seasoned detectives to decipher. The vibrant floats and marching bands continued their procession, unaware of the tragedy unfolding just a few meters away at the Schul and Wiedelschock. While the parade persisted, a cordoned-off area ensured that no curious onlookers stumbled upon the grim discovery. The unsolved murder of Petra Nohl cast a shadow over Cologne's history, becoming one of its most perplexing and enduring mysteries. Dedicated detectives tirelessly pursued every lead, no matter how faint, hoping for a breakthrough. Yet, despite their best efforts, each avenue led to a dead end. With time passing and no new information emerging, the case grew colder, its secrets locked away, waiting for the day they might be unraveled. The mystery surrounding Petra Nohl's murder was reignited in December 2022 when the Serious Crimes Police Force, LKA, in the North Rhine-Westphalia decided to reopen the case. A team of special investigators, equipped with the latest DNA analysis technology, combed through the evidence and canvassed the area for any potential leads. They were determined to leave no stone unturned in their quest for justice for Petra and her family. The unsolved murder of Petra Nohl was also thrust back into the spotlight after being featured on the popular true crime show, Aktenzagen XY Ungelöst, case number XY Unsolved. Little did investigators know that this televised appeal for information would ultimately lead to a breakthrough in the case. The breakthrough they'd been hoping for finally came. After the show ended, 5 individuals called in with new information, providing leads for the investigators to follow. Fueled by the renewed hope of bringing Petra's killer to justice, they meticulously examined each lead. Eventually, a crucial tip from a potential witness emerged, leading to the apprehension of a suspect. The case garnered significant attention when it was featured on the Aktenzagen XY program. A man present at the recording studio in Munich immediately stepped forward as a witness during the broadcast. The authorities in Cologne wasted no time in reaching out to him to gather more details. During the questioning, he described in detail the course of the evening. In the early hours of February 14, 1988, during the vibrant Carnival Saturday, the suspect found himself immersed in the lively atmosphere of the beer village and the Cherry Very nightclub. Petra Nohl, too, was reveling in the festive spirit on that eventful night. As the night wore on, he and his friend began feeling the need to head back home. Without hesitation, they made their way to a nearby taxi stand located in Tunisstrasse, united in their shared desire to call it a night. There, he and his friend met Petra Nohl. Engaging in friendly conversation, they discovered that they were all in search of a taxi, which was a challenge to find during the bustling carnival festivities. In an attempt to increase their chances of finding transportation, the group decided to make their way to Newmarket, hoping for better luck in that area. As they walked and continued their conversation, the two friends eventually parted ways, with the witness remaining at the taxi stand while his friend followed Petra towards Newmarket. The following day, news of the tragic homicide spread through the media, reaching the ears of the witness. Deeply affected by the events of the previous night, he felt compelled to go to the police and share what he knew. However, his friend strongly discouraged him from doing so, insisting that it would lead to no positive outcome. Respectful of their friendship, the witness chose to remain silent and refrained from providing a statement to the authorities. Over the course of 34 years, the two men drifted apart and were no longer friends. However, when the witness saw a photograph of Petra during the recent show, he immediately recognized her and decided to come forward with his detailed account. Initially hesitant to reveal his friend's name, the officers engaged in conversation with the witness, eventually convincing him to provide this crucial information. A former acquaintance of the victim stepped forward with a startling revelation. She claimed that the new suspect had been obsessively following Nohl during the 1980s, providing a vital link that had eluded investigators for decades. Forensic experts also played a vital role in shedding light on the case, providing valuable details for further investigation. They discovered fiber traces on Petra's clothing that suggested the perpetrator may have been wearing specific items, including a black leather jacket, faded jeans, and perhaps even cowboy boots. Additionally, Petra's black purse, which held her neck pouch, was missing. Inside the pouch, it was believed that the 100 Deutschmarks she borrowed from her friend and possibly tokens used for purchasing drinks in the Bierdorf Kolon could be found. These findings provided important clues for the ongoing inquiry. After years of lying dormant, the case of Petra Nohl's murder sprang to life with the arrest of Verschudermord, a 56-year-old man in Cologne. The man was taken into custody on February 14, 2023, exactly 35 years after the alleged crime took place in the city's historic old town, Allstadt, during the carnival season. According to police reports, the suspect has been accused of fatally strangling Nohl, who was 24 years old at the time, on the night before Carnival Sunday in February of 1988. During the initial questioning, the suspect stated that he had no recollection of the murder. However, forensic analysis revealed that his DNA matched the DNA found at the crime scene. It was determined that the suspect had no personal connection to Petra. Based on the evidence, the police concluded that the motive behind the crime was likely greed and intoxication and driven by selfish desires. The suspect, though denying the charges, did not resist arrest. He'll now face charges for murder, bringing some hope of closure to Petra's grieving family after a long and painful journey. Thanks to the combined efforts of the LKA's DNA analysis, the investigative work of the Cologne Criminal Police Department, and the information provided by a former acquaintance of Nohl after the case was reopened on a true crime TV program, the 56-year-old suspect was finally taken into custody. Queens was neither a very safe nor a very dangerous neighborhood in New York in 1992. Safer than about 40% of U.S. neighborhoods, it was a rather scenic and beautiful part of New York as compared to some others. But sadly, it also became the place where Nadine Slade met her tragic fate. Living in Queens in 1992, Nadine Slade was a humble and joyful teen who embraced her life as any other teenager. Her friends and family described her as an outgoing, smart, and creative girl. Nadine was very clever and was always curious to learn more about new things. She was a loving daughter and sister who loved her family wholeheartedly. Nadine would prioritize spending time with them over anything else. In May 1992, Nadine was staying with her family in a multifamily apartment in Far Rockaway. It was a remote beachside community in a neighborhood on the eastern part of the Rockaway Peninsula in Queens. Their apartment shared a common bathroom with another apartment on the same floor, which was occupied by other residents. On Thursday, May 7, 1992, Nadine's mother made a horrific discovery as she walked into the shared bathroom. 15-year-old Nadine's lifeless body was lying cold and naked in the bathtub. Her mother couldn't believe her eyes. She pulled herself together, rushed to the telephone, and rang up the authorities. Soon, the police arrived at Nadine's home in Far Rockaway and began investigating the crime scene. They made some frightening discoveries. The only article of clothing found on Nadine was her bra twisted around her neck. A closer investigation revealed that there were signs of struggle and self-defense on her body as well. Skin scrapings, which probably belonged to Nadine's killer, were found under Nadine's fingernails. The scrapings were obtained and preserved as evidence. Later, an autopsy revealed that the killer had strangled Nadine using her own bra. Nadine put up a fight with the perpetrator and had tried to defend herself. Apart from the skin scrapings found under Nadine's fingernails, the police had no potential evidence that could lead them to the perpetrator. The killer had escaped without a trace. The detectives continued the investigation and started interrogating Nadine's family and other residents of the building. Nothing suspicious was observed. When Nadine's aunt got to hear about the tragic news, she was shocked. Just a few days before her murder, Nadine's aunt, along with Nadine and her sister, had taken a short trip to Mississippi. They had a wonderful time there during the short getaway. Days went by and the police kept dedicating long hours to Nadine's case. But even after an extensive investigation, there were no new leads or suspects, and certainly no signs of the killer. Having made no progress by the end of 1992, Nadine's case slowly went cold, leaving her family and friends with many unanswered questions and a lot of grief. 30 years after Nadine was found dead, in 2022, Queens District Attorney Melinda Katz and the NYPD decided to reopen Nadine's case. At least 6 people were assigned to investigate the case this time. The joint investigation requested the New York City Medical Examiner's Office to test for DNA under the victim's preserved fingernail clippings. A sample of DNA, which most likely belonged to Nadine's killer, was obtained from the evidence and sent for examination. The detectives caught a break in the case when the DNA sample matched a profile in CODIS, the Combined DNA Index System, a national DNA database maintained by the FBI. The results from the DNA examination directed the cold case detective towards a 58-year-old man named Jerry Lewis of Shawsville, Virginia. The detectives made their way to Virginia, where Lewis was detained by the probation department. He was brought to the sheriff's office for questioning. After interrogating Lewis for hours, he was taken into custody on May 1, 2023, on the allegation of strangling and murdering Nadine using her own bra. The detectives did a thorough search of the old records and interviewed numerous witnesses. It was determined that on the night before Nadine's murder, Lewis had been staying in the apartment which shared the bathroom with Nadine's family in Far Rockaway, the same bathroom where Nadine's strangled body was discovered by her mother. A deep dive into Lewis's past revealed some troubling incidents. Lewis had a history of getting in trouble. He'd been in and out of jail several times. Lewis was accused of stealing a computer and some cash back in 2008. Lewis was convicted in 2015 in an attack on an 88-year-old Queens woman and was registered as a sex offender with the Virginia State Police in 2021, which is why his DNA was in the system. Lewis also served time in state prison for attempted murder, robbery, and drug possession. Apart from that, since April 2022, he'd been arrested 3 times, twice for alleged assault in incidents involving his girlfriend, the mother of his child. For his hearing, Lewis was brought to the Supreme Court in Queens, where he was charged with second-degree murder in connection with the death of 15-year-old Nadine Slade on May 7, 1992. Lewis pleaded not guilty of all the charges. Queens Supreme Court Justice Kenneth Holder ordered Jerry Lewis of Shawsville, Virginia, to return to court for another hearing on June 7, 2023. Until then, he'd be held without bail. If convicted of the charges, Lewis could face up to 25 years to life in prison. Several of Nadine's relatives were present during the initial proceedings of the hearing. As Nadine's sister watched Lewis being charged, she cried throughout the hearing. After nearly 3 decades, Nadine's family finally got the answers to their questions. They finally had some peace now that the perpetrator had been convicted and would face justice. The house where Nadine and her family used to stay in 1992 was knocked down years ago to make way for a church parking lot. But Shannon Hooks, the neighbor next door, still remembered what happened to the 15-year-old innocent girl.
To God be the glory. Justice has finally been served, and we thank God for it.
Queens District Attorney Melinda Katz and the NYPD were grateful to have solved a 3-decades-old cold case. She expressed her sympathy towards Nadine's family, who had long awaited some answers. She said, "Any mother's worst nightmare is to survive a child. To lose a child in such a horrific way causes unimaginable pain. Not knowing who committed the crime compounds the suffering." She also stated that in the end, the authorities hope to achieve justice for Nadine and bring closure and some measure of solace to her bereaved mother. DA Melinda Katz also stated that advances in DNA technology were a game changer in cracking this case, and that her cold case unit is actively investigating about 160 cold cases, with 80 of them having useful DNA evidence that might yield results with new testing. Mishawaka is a town in St. Joseph County, Indiana, USA. It grew through both industry and agriculture. In the late 19th century, Mishawaka became known as the peppermint capital of the world, since the area's rich black loam produced great quantities of mint. Mishawaka offered its residents a dense suburban feel and was termed as one of the best places to live in Indiana. Little did Shelly-Ann Werner know that her hometown also nurtured some merciless predators. Shelly-Ann Werner was born on July 4, 1964, in the town of Mishawaka. She grew up with her father, Ralph E. Werner, and her mother, Kathleen Werner, and her sister, Carrie M., at 110 Bercato Circle, Mishawaka. By 1980, Shelly had grown up to be a beautiful girl with red hair and a set of hazel-colored eyes. She was a junior at Mishawaka High School, and with a height of 5'7". She was slightly taller than her peers, who described her as a cheerful girl. On the afternoon of Monday, June 16, 1980, 15-year-old Shelly was out driving her orange Volkswagen Beetle. She'd gone to Wilt's Food Center at Lincoln Way East, Mishawaka, to pick up some groceries. When Shelly didn't return home that same day, her family contacted the authorities in Mishawaka. Sergeant Richard Seneff and Detective Captain Lanny Kaiser began the investigation and the search for answers on the same evening. The surrounding counties had been alerted to be on the lookout for Shelly. They interviewed the missing girl's family and the people around the area where Wilt's Food Center was located. An employee at the grocery store confirmed that Shelly had been there and made a purchase. She then left the store around 2:15 p.m., which was the last time she was ever seen. A witness claimed to have seen Shelly with a man at the time she was leaving the grocery store. The witness told the detectives that a young man walked over to her orange Beetle and pulled open the door on the driver's side where Shelly was seated initially. Shelly looked surprised. The young man got inside the car as Shelly slid over to the passenger seat. Shortly after, they drove away. The witness claimed that there may have been more men in the car. Shelly's missing case had started to look like an abduction. The police asked the witness to help them prepare a sketch of the person who was seen with Shelly. A sketch was released giving detailed information about the potential suspect. He was described to have been a white male, approximately 5'7", and must have weighed around 130 pounds. He had medium-length dirty blonde hair and a slight shabby dirty blonde mustache. He was wearing blue jeans with a blue denim jacket at the time. A few days went by and nobody came forward with any information about the suspect. There were still no traces of Shelly either. On Thursday, June 26, 1980, 10 days after Shelly's abduction, two women who were out walking on Madison Road shortly before noon discovered Shelly's body near an abandoned railroad line, about 200 feet north of Madison Road and about a mile west of US 31. The cold, lifeless body was lying face down in a ravine that ran parallel to a north-south access lane off Madison Road. They immediately informed the authorities. The detectives arrived at the scene and a close inspection followed. Shelly's body was partially clothed and badly decomposed when it was found. The body's identity was confirmed through dental x-ray records with the help of a South Bend dentist, Dr. Robert Allen. Clothing found on the body was similar to what Shelly was last seen wearing on June 16, 1980. There were no weapons found at the crime scene. The detectives sent the corpse for a medical examination to Memorial Hospital. Deputy Coroner Dr. Louis Grinsky conducted an autopsy on Shelly's body and prepared a report. The report stated that Shelly had been shot twice, once in the head and the other in some undetermined part of the body. It was difficult to pinpoint the location where the second bullet entered the body, as the body was badly decomposed. Dr. Louis Gorinsky ruled Shelly's death a homicide and stated the cause of death as a gunshot wound on the left side of her head. It was also determined that a large caliber bullet had been used, which was shot at a close range. Looking at the severely decomposed state of the body, the coroner stated that Shelly had been dead for 7 to 10 days. It was not possible to tell whether she had been assaulted or not. A few days later, Shelly's car was found abandoned at the Park and Shop grocery store at Lincoln Way and Beach in Osceola. It was sent for inspection, and a DNA sample was found and preserved. Kathleen Werner, Shelly's mother, who was a teacher at Merritt Elementary School and the Brandywine Public Schools near Niles, organized a memorial service for Shelly with the help of her fellow teachers. Shelly was buried at Fairview Cemetery, Mishawaka, St. Joseph County in Indiana. Even though the detectives were on the case contributing many long hours, the investigation was not making any progress. There were no clues about Shelly's killer's whereabouts. As the years passed, Shelly's case got lost in the pile of many other cold cases, as there were no more leads to follow up on. Over 40 years, multiple attempts were made to reopen Shelly's case. Investigators tried to solve the case, but were never able to do it. They interviewed as many as 145 people over the years. Crime Stoppers recreated the crime scene, but nothing pointed them towards the perpetrators. DNA evidence had been submitted as well, but it was ruled inconclusive with no identifiable DNA match. Shelly's case caught a break when Assistant Chief Dan Guibo hired 3 retired South Bend officers in January 2023 to work on the case. Jim Campbell, David Dossman, and Tim Corbett were the newly assigned cold case investigators who were determined to solve Shelly's case. Within a couple of months into the investigation, the detectives identified 3 people who were responsible for Shelly's murder. But sadly, all 3 of those people were already dead. The investigation arrived at this conclusion when a key witness came forward sometime in 2023. The witness's identity was not disclosed to the public. The information provided by this anonymous witness led the detectives to additional evidence and more witnesses. More than 40 years after Shelly's murder, they learned that Shelly's murder was a targeted attack by a set of individuals who Shelly was slightly familiar with and had distant knowledge of. Since all the suspects were already dead, the police decided not to release their names, as charges can't be filed against people who have passed away. On Monday, April 24, 2023, the police marked the cold case solved and closed the investigation. The death of those 3 perpetrators is what gave the anonymous witness the confidence to come forward and speak up. She, the witness, had been mistreated and victimized by one of the particular suspects. The police said that the suspects often threatened the witnesses, which kept them from coming forward and informing the authorities. They used to intimidate and threaten them and their families. Out of the 3 suspects, 1 suspect passed away in 2001 and 1 passed away in 2010. The authorities tried to contact Shelly's family, but got no response. The investigators shared some final thoughts on Shelly's case. This case takes us to Lenawee County, a county located in the state of Michigan, USA. Situated in the southeastern part of the state, it's bordered by the state of Ohio to the south. The county is known for its picturesque rural landscapes, charming small towns, and vibrant communities. On November 19, 1997, a farmer stumbled upon the partially decomposed body of an unidentified male in a cornfield off Corey Highway in Michigan. The man's naked body was missing both hands and his head. As police arrived on the scene, they were struck by the nature of the crime, with the victim's hands appearing to have been cut from just above the wrist. Upon closer examination, officers noticed saw striations on the ends of the bones, suggesting a sharp, serrated instrument had been used to remove them. Despite their best efforts, investigators were unable to identify the victim, labeling him simply as John Doe. Police scoured the area for any evidence and searched for the missing head and hands, but to no avail. It seemed the killer had gone to great lengths to conceal the man's identity. As rumors spread throughout the community, a theory emerged that the man was a victim of a drug deal gone wrong in Toledo, and his lifeless body was discarded in the cornfield. At that time, many murders were coming to the forefront because of drug deals. But who was this man? No one knew. The lifeless body of the unidentified man lay there, already well into the natural process of decay. Through careful analysis of the body's condition, the investigators deduced that the unfortunate victim had been left in the cornfield for a period ranging from several weeks to a month before being discovered. Some details about John Doe's physical appearance were revealed through an autopsy. The examination showed that he was a man in his prime, likely between the ages of 20 and 40. In life, he stood between 5 feet 5 inches and 5 feet 10 inches tall, and had a medium build. While much remained unknown about this man's life and death, these details offered a glimpse into the person he once was. DNA evidence was also extracted from the clothing of the man, but it didn't match anyone known at that time. Michigan State Police Detective Hugh Welsh meticulously pored over stacks of missing persons reports, determined to crack the case. With sharp focus, he eliminated the majority of reports, leaving behind only a select few that held the potential to lead him to the truth. Like a seasoned detective, Walsh refused to be deterred by the arduous task before him and continued his quest to uncover the identity of the man. Despite developing a DNA profile for the victim in September 1999, investigators had yet to uncover the identity of the man found murdered in Blissfield Township. The DNA profile, meticulously crafted through advanced forensic techniques, was shared across databases like the National Missing and Unidentified Persons System and genealogy websites, in hopes of discovering any matches that could finally provide answers to this cold case mystery. Detective Sergeant Larry Rothman of the Michigan State Police 1st District's Cold Case Unit remained determined to uncover the truth. While the cause of death was unknown, it was believed that the victim may have suffered from head trauma. Although there were still unanswered questions, Rothman believed that, with continued efforts, the puzzle pieces may fall into place. There was a possibility other people could be charged in connection with the crime. For 19 years, investigators tirelessly worked to solve the cold case of John Doe. The investigation into his murder was reopened in 2016, but progress was hindered by the COVID-19 pandemic and other pressing cases. However, with renewed vigor, the case was handed over to the Michigan State Police 1st District's Cold Case Unit, composed of skilled detectives and criminal justice students and faculty from Michigan State University. Using new technologies like genealogy websites, the team was determined to find the killer. Law enforcement agencies banded together to gather evidence and establish a timeline of events. The Michigan State Police 1st District's Cold Case Unit took point, with help from the Monroe Post and the 1st District Fugitive Team. The search also extended beyond state lines with the aid of the U.S. Marshal Service and the Lucas and Butler County Sheriff's Offices in Ohio. By working together, they were one step closer to finding answers in this cold case. The decades-long search for justice in the mysterious death of the John Doe found in the Michigan cornfield finally reached a breakthrough. Arrest warrants for Ricciardo Sepulveda, 51, of Cincinnati, and Michael Sepulveda, 49, of Toledo, were issued on January 17, 2023, leading to their arrest by the U.S. Marshal Service. The two men, brothers according to the Michigan State Police, faced charges in the 1997 cold case homicide of John Doe. Michigan Attorney General Dana Nessel made the announcement of the arrests, bringing closure to a long drawn-out investigation. The arrest was made through a DNA match, which was found on the clothing of John Doe. The Sepulveda brothers are facing some serious charges. They're now in the custody of the U.S. Marshal Service and will soon be extradited to Lenawee County to face the following charges: first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit first-degree murder, assault with intent to maim, conspiracy to commit assault with intent to maim, tampering with evidence, and conspiracy to commit tampering with evidence. These charges carry a heavy weight of punishment, with the murder charge potentially leading to life in prison without parole. Michael Sepulveda has decided to waive extradition, while his brother, Ricciardo Sepulveda, has a hearing scheduled for May 2023. The Attorney General's office has been monitoring the situation closely. Michigan Attorney General Dana Nessel expressed her gratitude to the law enforcement officials involved in the investigation, stating in a news release, "Their tenacity and unwavering commitment to solving this case has finally brought us one step closer to achieving justice for the victim and their loved ones." Her words echo the sentiment that all crime victims deserve justice, no matter how much time has passed since the crime was committed. While the John Doe is yet to be identified, it's hoped that the brothers will have more to reveal on who this victim could be. Officials are still looking for information about the case, and anyone with information about the case should contact Michigan State Police Detective Sergeant Larry Rothman at 313-407-9379. This case takes us to Milwaukee, the largest city in the state of Wisconsin, located on the western shore of Lake Michigan. It has a population of approximately 600,000 people and is known for its brewing industry, historical architecture, and vibrant arts and culture scene. The city is also home to several notable museums. Annette Love entered the world in the vibrant city of Milwaukee in 1960. While details surrounding her parents and personal life are few, one person holds precious memories of Annette, her older sister, Mary Love. Mary fondly recalls Annette's infectious joy and her remarkable resilience in the face of adversity. No matter what challenges came her way, Annette had a knack for bouncing back with unwavering determination. On July 16, 1990, in Milwaukee's 3400 block of North 4th Street, the day had begun like any other. But it suddenly turned into a nightmare when a group of sanitation workers stumbled upon a lifeless body in the street. They were horrified and immediately called for help. The authorities rushed to the scene with their sirens blaring, but the tranquility of the morning had already been shattered by the grim discovery. As the police from the Milwaukee department arrived, they saw a lifeless body lying exposed in the middle of the street. The officers' eyes were drawn to the victim's neck, where they observed the markings of a struggle and a gunshot wound that confirmed their fears. To make matters worse, the victim's lower body was unclothed and her legs were spread apart in a chilling manner. The examination of the lifeless body revealed a harrowing truth. Not only had she suffered a fatal gunshot wound to the head, but also a series of scratches on her face, indicating that she'd been subjected to a violent and merciless assault. The medical examiner's report confirmed the abhorrent nature of the attack. The investigators had a slim chance of solving the mystery: a foreign DNA sample found on the victim's body. The DNA sample was kept safe in a container, waiting for the day when technology would advance enough to reveal its secrets. The mystery of the identity of the body found in Milwaukee was finally solved when detectives confirmed it was Annette Love, a 29-year-old woman. They located her sister, Mary Love, and informed her of the tragic news on July 29, 1990. The news was too much to bear for Mary, and she collapsed in a fit of emotions upon hearing it. Her family had held on to the hope that she was still out there somewhere. But when the truth was finally revealed, their world was shattered. While the confirmation of her identity gave them some degree of closure, it also raised many more questions than answers. They were left to wonder what had led to her tragic end, and who was responsible for robbing them of someone so dear. Milwaukee was in shock after the news of Annette Love's murder spread. The city had already witnessed over 160 homicides in 1990, but the detectives were determined to find answers for her family. They carefully examined every aspect of Annette's life, from her daily habits to her relationships, in the hope of finding even a tiny clue that could help them solve the case. The detectives investigating Annette Love's murder tried everything in their power to find the killer, but the trail had gone cold. For years, they searched in vain for any clues that could help them solve the case. Slowly, with each passing year, the case grew cold. But then, in 2010, after 20 years, the case was reopened and the investigators found a small vial hidden away in the archives. Inside was a precious sample of DNA that could unlock the mystery of Annette's murder. With newfound determination, the investigators set out to use the latest technology to analyze the DNA and track down the killer. Thanks to the now advanced techniques of forensic testing, the detectives were finally able to unlock the mystery of Annette Love's murder. After sending the DNA sample out in the summer of 2010, it underwent extensive testing until they finally struck gold with the results. After 20 years, the long-awaited break in Annette Love's murder case came when detectives discovered a suspect, Larnell Washington, a 52-year-old man who had a history of violent crimes against women. The more they dug into his past, the more evidence they found linking him to the crime. With each new discovery, the case against him grew stronger, and they were more convinced that he was the one responsible for Annette's untimely demise. The detectives decided to interview her family once again, this time asking specifically if they knew Washington. During their interviews, they spoke with Annette's daughter, who lived with Annette at that time, and had just been a child when her mother was murdered. As she recounted her memories of Larnell Washington, the pieces began to fall into place. She vividly remembered Washington's crude remarks and aggressive behavior whenever he visited their house. It was clear that Washington had left a deep impression on her, and the detectives knew that this information could be crucial to their investigation. Annette's niece revealed that she'd warned both Annette and her uncle about Washington's behavior, and they decided to confront him and his gang. Armed with guns, they approached the group, but things quickly spiraled out of control, and a chaotic brawl ensued, with the gang members fighting back against them. After the confrontation with the gang members, she saw them lurking outside their home 2 weeks later. That day, it was only when they left that Annette hurriedly left the house to meet a friend at a nearby tavern. Unbeknownst to her, it would be the last time she would ever see Annette alive. The detectives were grateful for Annette's niece's bravery in coming forward with this new information, which helped them to better understand the events leading up to Annette's death. This newfound knowledge also gave them a fresh perspective on the case and provided new opportunities for the detectives to continue their investigation. Just when it seemed like the case was progressing, a new lead emerged that cracked the case wide open. In September 2020, Annette's cousin, who had already been questioned, came forward to the Milwaukee police detectives with new information that proved to be the key to unlocking the mystery. She revealed that a woman who had dated Washington had confessed to knowing that he was responsible for Annette's murder. The detectives followed up on this lead and finally managed to locate the woman. After initially denying any knowledge of the crime, she eventually revealed the shocking truth that Washington and his gang had killed Annette in cold blood. Later that night, they returned with bloodied shirts and were chanting, "She got shot." The detectives knew that they'd finally found the answers they were seeking for so many years. After years of searching for their prime suspect, Larnell Washington, Milwaukee detectives finally caught a break in April 2021 when they tracked him down to a barber shop in Lacey, Washington. After receiving a warrant to check Washington's DNA, they were able to collect DNA samples from him, and after extensive testing, it was confirmed on December 12, 2022, that the DNA on Annette's clothing matched with Washington's DNA. The detectives' hard work and unwavering dedication to solving the case had finally paid off. They then began to interview those who were close to Washington. As the detectives dug deeper into the case, they stumbled upon a shocking discovery. Ronald Braylove, a man with a long and violent criminal history, had allegedly confessed to killing Annette Love using his .22 semi-automatic pistol, the same gun used in her murder. The investigation also revealed that Braylove had a record of assaulting women, making the crime even more heinous. With 36 felony convictions, including violent assaults and robberies, Braylove was already serving a life sentence. However, the revelation that he was involved in another homicide with Washington was a surprise to the investigators. Larnell Washington, the suspect in Annette Love's murder case, is now finally behind bars and facing charges for the heinous crime. He's now being held in a Washington state jail, awaiting trial and possible extradition to Wisconsin. If convicted, he could be sentenced to a maximum of 25 years in prison for the first-degree reckless homicide charge against him. After 33 years of waiting and wondering, the victim's family is relieved that justice may finally be served for their beloved Annette. The wheels of justice may turn slowly, but they're always turning in the right direction. Larnell Washington, accused of killing Annette Love, is facing serious charges of first-degree reckless homicide, while his alleged accomplice, Ronald Braylove, will not be charged for this crime. However, Braylove's previous convictions, earning him the nickname Cemetery Killer, were punished with a lifetime in prison. As for Washington, his review hearing is scheduled for May 2023 in Washington state, and only time will tell if justice will finally be served for Annette Love. The Milwaukee Police Department has recently released a statement expressing their pride and gratitude towards the hardworking investigators who have devoted countless hours to bringing justice to Annette Love and her family. The MPD's tireless efforts and unrelenting commitment to solving this case is a testament to their unwavering dedication to ensuring the safety and well-being of the community they serve. Their dedication and perseverance serve as a shining example of the admirable qualities that we hope to see in all law enforcement agencies across the country. The natural beauty of the Wallkill River and the woodland splendor of its public, state, and private trails make it a beautiful place to live. Growing up in this small town, Megan had many friends and a close-knit community. Sadly, Wallkill also became the place where Megan met her tragic fate. Megan D. McDonald was born on May 2, 1982. She was loved by her mother, Elizabeth McDonald, and her sister, Karen, in Wallkill, Orange County, New York. Megan graduated from Burke Catholic High School in the year 2000. Her loved ones described her as a vivacious person who lit up any room she walked into. She was always the life of the party. By 2003, Megan was a lively 20-year-old girl. On Thursday morning, March 13, 2003, Megan dropped off her new boyfriend at his apartment and then went off to work. She began her part-time shift at American Cafe Restaurant in Galleria Mall in the town of Wallkill. It was an early shift which started at 10 a.m. and ended at around 3 p.m. After work, Megan took a trip to the HSBC Bank in the town to make a deposit. Then, around 7 p.m. in the evening, Megan arrived at a home in the neighborhood of Greenway Terrace, Wallkill, for a birthday party. At the time, Megan had been trying to end things with her last boyfriend named Edward V. Hawley, and when she found out that he too was present at the party at Greenway Terrace, she decided to not go in. Instead, about 30 minutes later, Megan arrived at a house in Middletown and made multiple calls trying to arrange for some marijuana. One of those calls was made to a friend who was present at the party where Hawley was. At around 12:15 a.m., Megan arrived back at the Wallkill birthday party and told people she was going to go smoke. But 2 minutes later, she drove away. At around 12:25 a.m., Megan arrived at her new boyfriend's house. He got in her car and told her that he didn't have any marijuana for her. Megan then told him that she'd go and get marijuana from Hawley. Since that night, Megan never returned home and was considered missing. Sadly, on Saturday, March 15, 2003, Megan's body was found on a narrow dirt path in a field off Bowser Road in Wallkill, New York. The police were informed, and soon the detectives took charge of the case. Lieutenant Brad Natalizio and investigator Michael Carletta of the New York State Police were leading the investigation. Megan's body was sent for an autopsy, which ruled her cause of death as blunt force trauma. Megan had severe injuries on her head and was badly beaten up. The blunt force trauma that the victim sustained was a result of an expressive homicide. An expressive homicide was an intimate personal relationship between the victim and offender. Megan's murder got a lot of attention by the citizens and was hugely covered by the media. The case was made New York Police Department's top priority. On March 17, 2003, Megan's car, a Mercury Sable, was found at the Kensington Manor apartment complex, 500 feet from Hawley's home. Police determined that the 20-year-old had been killed while she was in the driver's seat of her car. The car was sent for further inspection, and a foreign DNA sample was recovered and preserved. The detectives began interviewing Megan's family, friends, and some of the people present at the party. A resident of the Kensington Manor apartment complex who had witnessed an important event in Megan's case came forward with some key information. According to the witness, Megan's car was being followed through Wallkill by a dark-colored Honda Civic hatchback, or just a hatchback-style vehicle. It had a very loud sound system. Both the cars circled the parking lot near Kensington Manor twice before driving off. The detectives further found out that Hawley operated a purple-colored 1990 Honda Civic hatchback, which was registered to his mother. Even though there was some evidence against Hawley, it wasn't enough to confirm his involvement in Megan's murder. The police kept both Hawley and Megan's other boyfriend as potential suspects. For years, Megan's smiling face beamed through Route 17 billboards, keeping her case alive, seeking answers that didn't come. For years, Elizabeth McDonald, Megan's mother, awaited answers as the police built their case, interviewing and re-interviewing witnesses and friends of the vivacious 20-year-old. Even though there were no answers, Elizabeth McDonald waited and watched as the murder of her daughter became one of Orange County's most stubborn cold cases. Years passed, and bit by bit, the police collected over 700 pieces of evidence in connection to Megan's murder. In 2022, almost 19 years after Megan was found dead in Wallkill, the detectives took the help of scientific and technological advancements, hoping that it would lead them to Megan's killer. In 2022, the police had submitted the DNA sample found in Megan's car to a lab called Cybergenetics in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. They processed the electronic version of the DNA sample and were hoping to find a match. Furthermore, in January 2023, the New York State Police began receiving assistance from a private company called CyberCheck. This company was able to place the cellular devices of Megan, Holly, and suspect number 2 all together at key locations on the night of the homicide. An in-depth analysis of this finding confirmed this theory. In March 2023, the scientists at Cybergenetics Lab in Pittsburgh finally found a match. The detectives knew that they were now very close to catching Megan's murderer. After gathering some additional information, it was revealed that Edward Hawley had been in Megan's car on the night she went missing. The DNA sample obtained from the backseat of Megan's car was a perfect match for Hawley's. It was also noted that there was hostility between Hawley and Megan. Megan and Hawley had been involved romantically, but she attempted to end their relationship several days before the murder. Megan's new boyfriend back in 2003, who was identified as suspect number 2, was not named publicly as he passed away in 2010. Hawley allegedly owed Megan a substantial amount of money. In May of 2002, a couple of months before Megan's murder, Megan began receiving money from her deceased father's NYPD pension. However, on March 10, 2003, her bank account was overdrawn by nearly $1,000, something that had never happened before, as Megan was known to be quite responsible with her money. In Hawley's police interviews, he admitted that he owed Megan money, but claimed it was only $300. He stated that this was to pay her back for a car that Megan helped him purchase. A thorough review of the evidence in the case resulted in Edward Hawley being identified as the prime suspect in the murder of Megan McDonald. The detective stated that Hawley had a clear motive. Over the years, Hawley sat down for multiple interrogation sessions with the police. He stated that he and Megan had gotten into an argument a few days before her murder. But what seemed suspicious about those interviews was the fact that Hawley changed his story many times, specifically the reasoning behind the argument he had with Megan. Based on a review of the records associated with this case and numerous interviews, there was probable cause that on March 14, 2003, Edward V. Hawley did intend to murder Megan McDonald. Hawley was Megan's main marijuana supplier, and the detectives believed that Megan had reached out to him as a last resort on the night she was killed. New York State Police announced on Thursday, April 20, 2023, that a 42-year-old man named Edward V. Hawley had been arrested for second-degree murder in connection to Megan's death in March 2003. Edward Hawley, 42, of Wawayanda, New York, who was charged with second-degree murder, allegedly hit Megan multiple times on the head while in her car in the early hours of March 14, 2003. Hawley maintained his innocence in the case and kept claiming that he didn't have anything to do with Megan's murder. Lieutenant Natalizio stated that Hawley was arraigned in the city of Middletown court and remanded to the Orange County Jail without bail. He also said that this had been an unbelievable team effort amongst many law enforcement agencies, the Orange County community, the media, and Megan's family. They never gave up, and now Megan's family could finally have closure. The McDonald family waited for answers for 20 years, and now they finally had them. Elizabeth McDonald, Megan's mother, walked with a cane to a chair set near the podium, but others would do the talking in a press conference held in April 2023. As Hawley's wife and 2 daughters cried, witnessing the conference from a short distance, Megan's sister, Karen Whalen, shared some words. Through tears at an afternoon press conference, Karen Whalen thanked the police for never giving up. James Whalen, Karen's husband, said, "Today, the police gave us an answer that we've been searching for over 20 years. The monster who violently and senselessly took Megan's life now has a name and a face. The person arrested today will never be anything but a coward to our family." Putnam County is a rural community located in the Hudson Valley region of New York. Known for its beautiful scenery and small-town charm, residents of Putnam County enjoy a slower pace of life and a strong sense of community. But the friendly community was struck by horror when the story of 22-year-old Shaquierra Pinckney came to light through a horrific discovery. Born in Daytona Beach on July 7, 1993, Shaquierra Elaine Pinckney was the daughter of Hubert and Stephanie Pinckney. From a young age, Shaquierra was a bright and curious child, eager to learn and explore the world around her. She earned a certified nurse's assistant certificate from Daytona State College and was excited to pursue a career in healthcare. However, despite her best efforts, she was unable to find a job in her field in Watertown, where she went to earn for her two daughters, Anasty Moore and Ivy Moore. She continued to work hard, taking a job at a local Family Dollar store to support her family. In her free time, she enjoyed spending time with her daughters and her many friends who admired her. But before she could fulfill her dreams, fate had other plans for Shaquierra. Shaquierra Pinckney had left her life in Watertown, New York, and returned home 4 months pregnant and feeling homesick for her family. It was about a month after her return, on September 3, 2015, the owner and pastor of Coleman Mortuary in Hastings, Christopher Coleman, had a regular day ahead of him. He had a job to do, digging a grave for a burial. 2 gravediggers were assisting him in the task. However, just about 15 minutes into the job, Coleman noticed something strange, a putrid smell that made his stomach turn. It was coming from the wooded area at the rear of the Gethsemane Baptist Church's cemetery off Federal Point Road, and Coleman decided to investigate. As he approached the source of the smell, the sight that met his eyes was beyond horrifying. He'd stumbled upon a partially decomposed body of a woman who looked as though she'd been burnt and had been dumped there for 3 or 4 days. The police were immediately alerted. The Putnam Sheriff's investigators were initially at a loss when they arrived at the cemetery and saw the charred and unrecognizable remains of a body. Investigators from the Putnam County Sheriff's Office initially believed she might have been a farm worker due to the rural location, surrounded by farms off Federal Point Road in East Palatka. The body was sent for autopsy, and the remains were almost decomposed. The cause of the victim's death was not revealed to the public. However, the forensic report did state that the woman was 4 months pregnant and she was lit on fire. Then, with the help of fingerprints and tattoos that were still visible despite the damage done to her body, they were able to identify her as 22-year-old Daytona Beach resident Shaquierra Pinckney, who'd been reported missing from Volusia County. With the identification made, the authorities had to break the tragic news to her family. When the detectives arrived at Shaquierra's mother's house, the heartbroken Stephanie Pinckney revealed the details of her daughter's disappearance. It was supposed to be just another night at the family's residence on Berkshire Road. Everyone was home, and Stephanie had gone to bed. But in the early hours of August 31st, one of Shaquierra's daughters was crying at the bedroom door. When Stephanie went to check on her, she was shocked to find that Shaquierra was gone. The next day, on September 1st, 2015, around 3 a.m., Stephanie filed a missing person report with the Daytona Beach Police. Investigators discovered that Shaquierra didn't know anyone in Putnam County. But after her disappearance, her friends told her mother, Stephanie, that the man who impregnated Shaquierra wanted her to get an abortion. However, she wanted to keep the baby. It raised some suspicions, but it was not an ordinary case. Sheriff H.D. Gator DeLoach said, "This was a complicated case with several jurisdictions handling different parts of the case." The case, which started with a missing person report in Daytona Beach, took a grim turn when the remains of Shaquierra Pinckney were discovered in Putnam County. And just when investigators thought they'd seen it all, they found her vehicle, a 2001 Honda Accord, abandoned in St. Johns County, miles away from where she was last seen. Without any leads, the police were at an impasse, and the case went cold. Just when the detectives thought all hope was lost, a new lead emerged that set the investigation ablaze. It turned out that Shaquierra had advertised her services in an escort section, going by the name Poison. In a skimpy outfit on August 30th, 2015, the ad claimed she had zero tolerance for violence. Police Chief Mike Chitwood and Putnam Sheriff's Captain Johnny Greenwood were tight-lipped about the case due to an ongoing investigation, but it was clear that they were onto something. Sheriff DeLoach's words hinted at the severity of the case. "There's so much more I'd like to tell you about this case and about our suspect. But he mentioned that the ultimate goal was a conviction, so he couldn't divulge any information, such as motive or any other facts. However, according to the sheriff, Shaquierra was known to access and post pictures on the website, which is where she crossed paths with her killer. On August 30th, 2015, the killer contacted her through her ad on the website, and what followed was a brutal murder. She was gagged, killed, and then burned. Through old-school detective work, the suspect was identified as 42-year-old Lorenzo Benjamin Hudson. Lorenzo Benjamin Hudson, the prime suspect in Shaquierra Pinckney's murder, had a criminal history that had long preceded this heinous crime. Born in 1981, Hudson had spent his formative years in East Palatka. He grew up and his criminal activities increased, which ended him up in jail. When identified as a suspect in this case, he was serving a 5-year prison sentence at the Okaloosa Work Camp, a minimum security facility for a string of burglary and grand theft charges. With Hudson's release due in December 2023, authorities were racing against time to build a strong case against him for the murder of Shaquierra Pinckney. Lorenzo Benjamin Hudson's crimes caught up with them as he was indicted on April 10, 2023, and he faced a slew of new charges, including capital felony murder of an unborn child, second-degree felony use of a dead body, and third-degree felony tampering with physical evidence. Hudson's previous sentence would continue to run until December, which was supposed to be his release date. However, he'd now be transported to Putnam County for arraignment, according to State Attorney Mark Johnson.
He's now facing a total of 4 new charges to include capital felony murder of an unborn child, second-degree felony abuse of a dead body, and third-degree felony tampering with physical evidence.
Where he'd be housed after that would be determined by other officials. The state attorney's office would decide whether to pursue the death penalty against Hudson. Shaquierra's family waited a long time for closure, and while nothing can ever bring their loved one back, they were able to take comfort in the fact that the person responsible for her death had been apprehended. Niceville, a city in Okaloosa County, Florida, United States, is located near Eglin Air Force Base on Boggy Bayou that opens into Choctawhatchee Bay. It's in the section of the Florida Panhandle known as the Emerald Coast. Niceville has always been famous for its pristine beaches and blue-green waters. But this beautiful city was where Marselina A. Liza met her traumatic end in 2002. Marselina A. Liza was born on December 15, 2000. By 2002, Marselina had grown up to be a chubby little toddler with dark hair and wide eyes, and was staying with her mother, Mary Jean Liza, in Niceville, Florida. On December 30, 2002, Marselina had been brought to a hospital in Pensacola, Florida, by her mother, Mary. Marselina had had a seizure and wasn't responding. Marselina's condition was critical, and things weren't looking good for her. And sadly, on December 31, 2002, Marselina passed away when she was merely 2 years old. The authorities were made aware about the child's death immediately, as it appeared to be a homicide. The investigators arrived and began questioning Mary and the medical staff who handled Marselina's case at the hospital. The investigators learned that Marselina had multiple injuries, including 18 bruises all over her body. Further, an autopsy was conducted and a medical examiner ruled her death a homicide from blunt force head trauma. Initially, the police had no leads or suspects. They kept questioning Mary, Marselina's mother, to figure out what exactly happened to the little girl. Mary kept telling the investigators that she couldn't recall anything about the incident and claimed that she certainly didn't know how her child died. On November 6, 2003, in another round of questioning, Mary told the detectives that she may have blacked out due to anger and done something unintentionally to her child. Mary became a prime suspect in Marselina's murder, but the police didn't have enough evidence to link her to the crime yet. Mary's statement was followed by an extensive investigation. The detectives interviewed multiple witnesses who told them that Mary was known for her terrible temper and had no previous history of experiencing any blackouts. But even this information wasn't enough to pinpoint Mary as the killer. Soon, Marselina's case stopped making any progress and eventually went cold. By 2021, almost 19 years had passed since Marselina's death, but Okaloosa County Sheriff's Office investigator Captain David Allen and his colleagues were not yet ready to give up on the case. They decided to go back and look at all the evidence again in hopes of gaining a new perspective. The Sheriff's Office asked the District 1 Medical Examiner's Office to review the autopsy and findings from 2002. They believed that a mistake had been made earlier. The medical examiner conducted an autopsy on Marselina's remains in April 2021, and a revised autopsy report was prepared. The medical examiner's office agreed and changed the cause of Marselina's death from homicide to shaken baby syndrome. Shaken baby syndrome is a serious brain injury that can be caused by forcefully shaking an infant or toddler. The shaking can cause the child's brain to move back and forth inside the skull and would result in bruising, swelling, and bleeding of the brain. In such cases, it's usually observed that the parents or the caregiver was overly frustrated or angered, often because the child wouldn't stop crying. Later in 2021, based on the evidence, revised autopsy report, and new interviews, the police were able to submit an arrest warrant for felony murder on Mary. The Yuba County Sheriff's Department arrested Mary Liza in California on September 23, 2021. The Okaloosa County Sheriff's Office on Friday, October 1, 2021, announced that Mary Jean Mansker, formerly Mary Jean Liza, had been taken into custody in California for allegedly killing her daughter, Marselina A. Liza, in Niceville in December 2002. Mary was extradited to Okaloosa County Jail on December 6, 2021, and then released on a $10,000 bond 2 weeks later on December 23, 2021. In September 2022, Mary was taken into custody and awaited her trial. On November 18, 2022, she was indicted by an Okaloosa County grand jury for first-degree felony murder and was sent to Yuba County Jail to be held there without bail. Investigators said Mansker mistreated her child on December 30, 2002, and caused injuries that led to her death. Mary Liza was 18 years old at the time of the crime on December 30, 2002. Authorities said she'll be extradited back to Okaloosa County, where she'll face at least one murder charge. Her pretrial conference took place on February 13, 2023. Sheriff Eric Aiden spoke about the dedication of the investigators at the OCSO and thanked the CID, Criminal Investigation Division, for their dedication towards the case. He also stated that he and his colleagues are passionate about working the cold cases, and even if they couldn't solve everything for the moment, they would still go in there and actively see if there was anything they could turn over that would remotely result in any progress in that case. This case takes us to Lillian, a small unincorporated community located on the coast of Alabama in the United States. It's situated in Baldwin County near the Florida state line. The community is known for its beautiful natural scenery, including waterways, beaches, and parks. Lillian is also home to several local businesses, including restaurants, shops, and accommodations for visitors. Davin Kennedy was born in 1993 and welcomed by his mother, Tammy Sim. In 2015, he was 22 and a young father to a then 2-year-old daughter. Davin had big dreams and a heart full of love for his family. He was a devoted father and son, and his ambition was to create a better life for his family. Davin had set his sights on owning a restaurant and pursuing a career in real estate. He was a driven young man, determined to make his dreams a reality. On November 15, 2015, the mother of 22-year-old Davin Kennedy, Tammy Sim, reported him missing after he failed to return home following a day of attending college classes and working in Pensacola. Sims and other mothers organized a rally a few hours after Davin went missing, urging anyone with information to come forward. Sims expressed her plea to the community, stating that people were aware of what was happening but refused to speak up. She emphasized that it could happen to anyone's son, grandson, brother, cousin, or loved one, urging people to imagine what it would be like if it happened to their own family members. Sadly, their worst fears were realized the next day, on November 16, 2015, when a family living on Farley Lane near Lillian, an unincorporated community situated along the picturesque coast of Alabama, made a shocking discovery on their private road. They found a car with the body of Davin Kennedy of Pensacola in the back seat, shot to death. At the time of Davin Kennedy's disappearance and subsequent death, authorities were met with multiple leads that pointed towards potential suspects. However, due to the lack of concrete evidence, none of the suspects were taken into custody. Despite countless investigative efforts, the case eventually went cold, as all leads were exhausted, according to a statement released by the sheriff's office. The investigators maintained the case as open, but the trail of the killer had gone cold. It seemed as though justice for Davin Kennedy would remain out of reach. However, the hardworking investigators at the Baldwin County Sheriff's Office didn't give up. They continued to follow leads, gather evidence, and explore every possible angle. Finally, in 2023, after all this time, a breakthrough emerged after 8 years. New information came to light that allowed them to refocus on the case and ultimately led to the arrest of a suspect. The long-awaited justice for Davin Kennedy's murder case finally unfolded as the Baldwin County Sheriff's Office in Alabama announced the arrest of Decody Darnell Herring on April 21, 2023. The 32-year-old suspect was charged with the murder of the 22-year-old father from Pensacola, Florida. The arrest came after investigators re-examined the case and uncovered new information that, combined with the initial physical evidence from the crime scene, led to the issuance of an arrest warrant for Herring's alleged involvement in Davin's death. The investigators never released the information regarding what this initial physical evidence was, nor what the new information could be. But it was the physical evidence from the crime scene, combined with the totality of the information and evidence developed during the renewed investigation, that played a vital role in this arrest. Amidst the clinking of handcuffs and behind bars, Decody Darnell Herring, a 32-year-old Pensacola man, awaits his fate at the Baldwin County Jail. Since his booking on April 19, 2023, Herring has remained confined on charges of murder, unable to secure his release as he sits behind bars with a weighty $150,000 bond on his shoulders. The Baldwin County Jail records indicate that Herring has yet to retain legal representation to defend himself against the charges. The investigation into the murder of Davin Kennedy is far from over, as the Baldwin County Sheriff's Office revealed. With the new leads and evidence, they anticipate more information to surface in the coming days. The BCSO expressed gratitude to the Florida law enforcement officials for their help in the investigation, though they did not disclose how they aided. As the case moves forward, the authorities remained committed to seeking justice for Davin Kennedy and his family, who've been waiting for answers for years. Yonkers is a city in Westchester County, New York. Developed along the Hudson River, it's the third most populous city in the state of New York, after New York City and Buffalo. The city is home to several attractions, including access to the Hudson River, Tibbetts Brook Pond, the Hudson River Museum, and Sherwood House. But this busy and attractive city also has a dark side. When it came to its citizen safety, Yonkers was somewhere in the middle. The chances that a person would fall victim to a violent crime here were 1 out of 395. And sadly, in 2005, Angel Serbay was one of those victims. Angel Leanne Serbay was born in 1980. Angel's early life was a blur and not much is known about it. In 2005, when Angel was 25 years old, she was living in Yonkers, Westchester County, New York. She also had a 5-year-old son who used to live with Susan, Angel's mother. Susan described Angel as a lost soul who was trying her best to find her way. Angel was a troubled young adult who used to hang out with a tough crowd. She also had a record of minor arrests for drugs. Angel had asked her mother to take care of her 5-year-old son till she got her life back on track and was ready to look after her son. On September 3, 2005, a passerby noticed something strange on the shoulder of the Sprainbrook Parkway in Greenburgh, Yonkers' neighboring town in Westchester County. It was Serbay's cold and lifeless body, wrapped up in a leopard print blanket. The New York Police Department was immediately informed. Within moments, detectives arrived to inspect the crime scene. The marks on Serbay's body indicated that she was beaten and strangled. An autopsy report later revealed Serbay had been assaulted before being strangled to death. During the autopsy, a bodily fluid belonging to the perpetrator was collected and sent for preservation. The detectives dedicated many hours to Serbay's case, but even after an intense investigation, there were no traces of the perpetrator. A year after Serbay's death, her mother, Susan, pleaded for the public's help in finding Serbay's killer. But soon, Serbay's case joined the pile of many other cold cases. In 2019, almost 14 years after Serbay's murder, the detectives decided to run a search of Serbay's killer's DNA in their databases. Luckily, they found a perfect match. The DNA results led the police to a man named Christopher Gonzalez of Naples, Florida, who was already in custody for a separate murder. In December of the year 2000, Gonzalez assaulted and murdered a 19-year-old girl named Dora de Valle Almontezer. Almontezer was house-sitting for her uncle in Bronx when Gonzalez strangled her to death using a telephone cord. Gonzalez's fingerprints and DNA were recovered from the crime scene. Similar to Serbay's case, Almontezer's case, too, went cold for many long years. However, the task force renewed the investigation into Almontezer's case in 2016 with the hopes of catching her killer. Bronx detectives resubmitted a fingerprint found on the phone at the Almontezer's murder scene to a national database. It matched Gonzalez, whose fingerprints were on file because he'd not paid a fine following his arrest in a 2005 forged license case in the Bronx. In another traffic violation case where Gonzalez was caught driving without a license in early 2017, he was fined by the Collier County Sheriff's Office. Gonzalez reportedly paid a $500 bond and was quickly back home in Naples, Florida. On November 7, 2017, Christopher Gonzalez was arrested in connection to Dora de Valle Almontezer's murder and assault. At this time, Gonzalez was an employee at Toys R Us and was living with his girlfriend. On December 8, 2017, Gonzalez was extradited to New York. The investigators recalled Gonzalez being very careful not to touch anything, in case he might leave his DNA behind. The detectives arranged for a warrant to collect Gonzalez's DNA, which matched the one found at Almontezer's crime scene. While the detectives connected Gonzalez to Serbay's murder, they still kept the investigation going. They learned that Gonzalez had lived near Almontezer in the Bronx at the time she was killed, and later in Yonkers' Nodine Hill neighborhood, where Serbay had been staying in 2005. On May 16, 2019, Gonzalez was indicted in Westchester County for Serbay's murder and charged on 2 counts of murder in the first degree and 1 count each of assault in the first degree and a criminal act in the first degree. Gonzalez denied having any involvement in either of the murders. But in December 2022, just a few days before Christmas, Gonzalez had a change of heart and admitted to committing both crimes. On January 18, 2023, Gonzalez reached a plea deal with prosecutors in both counties that allowed him to plead guilty to second-degree murder in each case. Gonzalez acknowledged strangling Serbay when acting State Supreme Court Judge Robert Neary asked him how he'd killed her. But he said he couldn't remember the specifics of where he left her body, only that it was on a highway. On March 17, 2023, in Westchester County Court, Judge Robert Neary sentenced 41-year-old Christopher Gonzalez to 20 years to life in state prison for the 2005 murder of Yonkers resident Angel Serbay. In a statement read in court, Susan, Serbay's mother, said, "While I'm grateful that her murderer, Christopher Gonzalez, was eventually caught, and am thankful that law enforcement never gave up on catching him, the years of waiting have taken a toll on me and have been excruciating. I do not forgive Christopher Gonzalez. I believe him to be an evil, ruthless, soulless man. Westchester County District Attorney Miriam E. Roca thanked the New York State Police, the NYPD, the Collier County Sheriff's Office, and the Bronx District Attorney's Office for their assistance in this case. She also stated, Angel Serbay was murdered and inhumanely left on the side of the road. And now, 18 years later, we've gotten justice for her family, friends, and community. A close friend of Angel Serbay, Teresa Lopez, was at the court, as she had been for most of Gonzalez's appearances. Lopez met Serbay when they were in junior high and became immediate friends. She would accompany Serbay and her grandmother each weekend when Serbay competed in bowling tournaments. They lost touch for a few years, but reconnected when both were young mothers 2 decades ago. Lopez said she was actually stuck in traffic on the Sprainbrook Parkway on September 3, 2005, not knowing it was because police were there investigating the death of her friend. Lopez, too, was happy that her friend's killer had finally been caught. Sullivan County, Tennessee is a serene landscape of rolling hills and serene beauty. But beneath its picturesque facade, a chilling crime unfolded on July 10, 1984. 40-year-old Floyd Otis Turner, a respected and cherished family man, met a fate so brutal that it would haunt the community for years to come. Slumped lifelessly in the passenger seat of his car, the crimson stain above his right ear whispered of the gunshot that ended his life. Floyd Otis Turner, a remarkable embodiment of true Christian values and a dedicated family man, was born in 1944 in the state of Tennessee. He grew up in a close-knit community with his brother Don Turner. Floyd developed strong moral values and a deep sense of responsibility towards his loved ones. While not much else is known about his life, it is known that he was married and had a wife and 2 children. The Turner family resided in a peaceful suburban neighborhood of Blountville, Tennessee. His brother Don described Floyd as a family man and a loving father and husband. Floyd began working at Eastman Chemical Company soon after completing his college degree. He joined the company and quickly demonstrated his exceptional work ethic and commitment to excellence. Over the years, he steadily climbed the corporate ladder, taking on more challenging roles and earning the respect of his colleagues. By the time of his unfortunate passing, Floyd had become a valued member of the Eastman team, known for his dedication, expertise, and unwavering integrity. In addition to his career at Eastman, Floyd pursued a side venture in insurance sales, driven by his entrepreneurial spirit and desire to secure a bright future for his family. He was always on the lookout for opportunities that could provide financial stability and allow him to give his loved ones the best possible life. One such opportunity presented itself on July 9, 1984, when Floyd had plans to meet with a new client to discuss a possible insurance sale, one that apparently would be very good for him if he got the deal. What exactly unfolded is unknown, but it's believed Floyd was on his way home from the business meeting when the tragic incident occurred. It was the next day, on July 10, 1984, that Keith Elton, a deputy officer from the Sullivan County Sheriff's Office, stopped to check a car parked on the side of the road under Interstate 81 in the Gunnings community that had the window down and the driver's door ajar. It was then that he made the devastating discovery of Floyd's lifeless body in the car.
I think the reason they turned around was because the window was down and it had started to rain.
So it appeared that someone shot him from while they were inside the car.
That's what it appeared to be.
Overwhelmed by the shocking sight, he immediately informed his superiors at the sheriff's office. But why did this chilling act of violence befall Floyd Otis Turner?
My cousin told me that Otis had been shot. So last thing I remember, I guess I fell down.
In the early stages of the investigation, due to powder burns and a steel imprint on his right hand, police believed that perhaps Floyd had taken his own life. They learned that he used to keep a gun locked in the glove compartment of his car, and that glove compartment was found to be unlocked. When they searched the car and the surrounding area, the gun was nowhere to be found. Due to this, they deemed it a homicide, as if Floyd had taken his own life, the murder weapon would have been in his hand. They collected other evidence from the crime scene, including a cigarette butt and a bottle, which were stored away for later use. A few days later, a fisherman discovered Lloyd's missing gun in a lake miles away from the crime scene. Sadly, no useful evidence could be recovered from it. In a shocking turn of events, a few months after Floyd's death, his family's home burnt down, Luckily, his wife and children weren't hurt, but this baffled investigators further. Was this related to Floyd's murder in any way? Unfortunately, after this, the leads dried up, and eventually, the case went cold. For nearly 4 decades, the case remained an enigma, a puzzle that seemed destined to forever elude resolution. The community grew more and more desperate for solutions as time went on, which only made the wounds worse. Evidence from the crime scene was retested for DNA multiple times, including in 2011, but nothing ever came up. A ray of hope emerged in 2023, emerging from the depths of secrecy. A reliable informant stepped forward, bearing the weight of the truth on their shoulders. It was this informant who revealed the name of a man, Johnny Barb, who had not only confessed to the murder to this informant, but also disclosed specific details about the case, reigniting the pursuit of justice that had long seemed lost. With newfound determination, investigators re-examined every aspect of the case. They retraced Floyd Otis Turner's last steps, piecing together fragments of information that had long been forgotten. The revelation provided by the informant acted as a roadmap, leading them closer to the elusive truth. They discovered crucial evidence that had been overlooked. Some of that evidence was forensic analysis, which yielded new DNA evidence, fingerprints, and other physical traces. The reinvestigation propelled the case forward, inching closer to the long-awaited breakthrough. The name that emerged from the shadows as the prime suspect was Johnny Barb. However, when detectives looked into his whereabouts in the present, they learned that he'd already passed away. Nevertheless, they were determined to close the case once and for all. In the hopes of that, a Sullivan County grand jury heard detailed testimony from the detective in this case and saw a timeline of events from the date of the crime until the present. The grand jury found that the evidence clearly determined that Johnny Barb committed the murder, and a true bill would have been returned if Barb were still alive, finding him guilty of the crime. Speaking after the case was closed, Sheriff Jeff Cassidy of the Sullivan County Sheriff's Office said he was pleased that the case was finally closed and was happy that they could bring Floyd's family some semblance of closure. Turner's brother Don also spoke to the media and said that though he still has questions about what happened to his brother, he's glad that the suspect has been identified. "I'm thankful they got the one now," Turner said.
On July 8, 1987, the haunting words, "Murder on Elm Street, Carlsbad," echoed through the town, shattering its peace. The mystery around 38-year-old Donna Sue Hyatt's murder and her nameless killer left the detectives grappling in a desperate quest for answers. Each step in the investigation led to a web of confusion, finally arriving at a dead end. Who could have committed such a heinous crime? Why secrets lay concealed within the seemingly peaceful facade of this suburban haven? Beneath the sun-soaked desert skies, nestled in the heart of enchanting New Mexico, lies the small and captivating city of Carlsbad. Life here moves at its own rhythm, and this laid-back pace allows the residents to connect deeply with nature and their beautiful surroundings. Wide open spaces and warm southern hospitality define the essence of community. Carlsbad is a place where traditions run deep and where the scent of homemade barbecue wafts through the air. Imagine the horror that's unleashed when a violent crime occurs in a place like this, making everyone a potential suspect. Donna Sue Black Hyatt was born on a late summer day on August 28, 1948, in Carlsbad, Eddy County, New Mexico, to parents Roger and Sybil Black. She possessed an undeniable spirit that touched the lives of those around her, and as she grew, her personality only became more radiant. Donna attended New Mexico State University in Carlsbad. Guided by her unwavering faith, she became an active member of the First Baptist Church, finding solace and strength within its walls. She was also involved with the Christians Women Club, where she formed lasting connections and brought joy to everyone she met. She became a devoted mother to two beautiful girls, Michelle Perry and Angela Hulsey. She was beautiful inside and out, loved by her family and cherished by the community. Her story of love and faith sadly ended in brutality when her life was abruptly taken away, leaving her family scared. On the fateful night of July 8, 1987, one of Donna's daughters came home late. As the moon cast its pale glow on Elm Street and the clock inched closer to 11:40 p.m., the girl went around the house looking for Donna. To her shock, she found her mother lying lifeless in a large pool of blood. Donna Sue Hyatt had been assaulted and killed in her own home. She was 38 years old. The daughter made a frantic call to the police that same night, and with it, the wheels of the investigation began to turn. The police searched the crime scene for any clues that could unveil the murderer, but whoever killed Donna was no amateur and had carefully covered all tracks. The detectives could only find traces of DNA that they hoped would lead to a potential suspect. With no breakthroughs at the crime scene, investigators attempted to retrace Donna's last moments, looking for any shred of information. Witnesses came forward, saying they had seen Donna leaving a nearby store with a tall, Caucasian man around 9:15 p.m. the same night she died. Questions gripped the detectives. Was he a predator, lurking in the shadows, biding his time until the opportune moment presented itself? Or did Donna's path intersect with another individual that night? A chance encounter that took a fateful turn. The haunting hours between 9:15 p.m. and 11:40 p.m. held the key to unraveling Donna's fate. However, there were too many possibilities and not enough leads. There was no way of knowing if she had invited the killer inside, if the killer had followed her home and forcibly entered, or if the killer simply had a key. These theories meant everyone was a suspect in the eyes of justice. The autopsy report revealed that Donna had been stabbed using a sharp blade of some kind. The experts analyzed the DNA found at the crime scene and discovered that it did not belong to Donna or any frequent visitors of the house. The DNA of this unidentified person gave some initial hope to figuring out the killer's identity. But unfortunately, the police database showed no matches for the profile. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into years, but no tips came in, and the investigative wheels slowly ground to a halt. The man who was seen with Donna that night became an enigmatic figure, a phantom whose identity remained elusive. Each lead was pursued, yet like whispers carried away by the wind, the trail grew cold, fading into the shadows of time. Decades passed, but the memory of that fateful night lingered in the collective consciousness of the Carlsbad Police Department. 36 years later, in 2023, Detective Joey Longroff and Detective Tim Nice were ready to breathe life back into a long, forgotten case. They began reviewing the cold homicide case to find the elusive killer. Aware of the recent advancements in forensic technology, the detectives took help from genetic genealogy. In the realm of genetic genealogy, DNA, the building blocks of life, are the threads that connect past and present, and can unearth criminals by exploring their familial ties. Crime scene evidence from Donna's home on Elm Street, carefully collected and preserved for over 3 decades, found its way into the hands of a meticulous scientist at Othram, a private genetic genealogy company based in Texas. They used forensic-grade genome sequencing, or FGGS, to build a digital DNA profile of the suspect. Othram's team meticulously scoured online genealogy databases to find a match for the profile. Finally, in the labyrinth of ancestral records and hidden bloodlines, a name rose to the surface: Michael Ruff Wigley. Michael Ruff Wigley, from the city of Vegas, Texas, was born on March 6, 1959. At the tender age of 19, he was stationed at Fort Hood as a soldier. But behind the facade of military discipline lurked a hidden malevolence that would shatter many lives. One of his early victims was Sandra Bellman, an innocent 18-year-old newlywed, brimming with the dreams of new life. But her journey through blissful matrimony was brutally cut short on July 18, 1980. Found near Copperas Cove, Texas, her lifeless body bore the scars of violence. It was revealed that she was beaten to death. Wigley was immediately arrested after the incident, and his indictment took place on October 1, 1980, where he was charged with the murder of Sandra. But the horrors did not end there, as there was an even darker revelation, a charge of assault against a Keeleen woman committed on June 30, 1980, just 18 days prior to Sandra's murder. Soon enough, Wigley found himself confined within the cold embrace of the Coryell County Jail, bonds totaling $50,000. He was eventually released from prison and lived the life of a free man, but fate had other plans for him. On October 11, 1989, Wigley was driving along the northbound lane of U.S. Route 60 in his 1978 Ford Mustang. Wigley's mind may have wandered, for he did not slow or stop at the railway intersection, despite the warning wails of an oncoming Santa Fe railway train. The fatal collision that followed was so powerful that the train carried the remnants of Wigley's Mustang for 0.6 of a mile. Michael Ruff was 30 years old when he lost his life. He was buried in the Llano Cemetery in Amarillo, Texas. Upon compiling new DNA information in relation to the existing case evidence, Detective Landgraf and Detective Nice identified Wigley as the prime suspect. Through a series of interviews with family members, they were able to prove Wigley had been present in Carlsbad, New Mexico around the time Donna was murdered, even though he had already died and would not get the punishment he deserved. The investigators were keen to prove his guilt without a doubt and close the cold case. Finally, they obtained a warrant to exhume Wigley's body in Amarillo, Texas. Working with tandem with law enforcement officials in Amarillo, Wigley's once-forgotten grave was unearthed, and the remains were quickly sent to Othram for analysis. The stage was set, the pieces were in motion, and the dance with destiny had begun. With the use of kinsnip testing, the experts at Othram tested Wigley's DNA against the profile created using crime scene evidence. The city of Carlsbad lent its unwavering support in the form of financial assistance. The results were generated on April 11, 2023. Unsurprisingly, his DNA held the undeniable markers that led him to the crime scene and proved his guilt. It was a perfect match. Michael Ruff Wigley, though deceased, was accused of claiming Donna Sue Hyatt's life in 1987. Detective Joey Landgraf and Tim Nice of the Carlsbad Police Department emerged as the unsung heroes who had tirelessly pieced together the fragments of a decades-old puzzle. Their unwavering commitment and foresight proved instrumental in finally bringing closure to a haunting chapter in the city's history. Carlsbad Mayor Dale Janway expressed heartfelt appreciation for the officers and detectives from 1987 who valiantly responded to the haunting scene that fateful night. Their role in preserving the crime scene's integrity and diligently collecting crucial evidence was the pivotal factor that allowed the case to finally be solved 36 years later. It is our sincere hope that the recent efforts and the efforts of those involved in 1987 can bring some small form of peace and closure to the family of Donna Sue Hyatt and the community of Carlsbad, Janaway said.
Within the formidable walls of Sing Sing Prison, nestled in the heart of Westchester Village in Ossining, New York, a place designated to contain the most dangerous criminals, an act of violence unfolded. It was here in this maximum security facility that the life of an inmate was mercilessly taken on that fateful Christmas Eve in 1995. The name of the victim was Michael Jones. He was 32, and his story would soon intertwine with the enigmatic and treacherous world of the 5% Nation. Before his life was tragically cut short, Michael Jones had found himself within the clutches of the criminal justice system. Michael Jones was a prisoner who was fatally stabbed in the chest with a buck knife on Christmas Eve in 1995 while serving time at Sing Sing Correctional Facility in Ossining, New York. He was 32 years old at the time of his death. Jones was serving a 20 to 40-year prison term for attempted murder and robbery in Queens. Jones's murder was part of a deadly gang feud involving members of the 5% Nation, a group also known as Nation of Gods and Earths. Serving a lengthy prison term for attempted murder and robbery, he existed within the confines of his sentence, facing the daily challenges and dangers that permeated Sing Sing prison. On that cold, unforgiving Christmas Eve in 1995, the tranquility of Sing Sing prison was shattered. In a recreation area teeming with inmates, an act of violence erupted, forever altering the lives of those involved. Michael Jones, in a harrowing twist of fate, found himself in the crosshairs of a ruthless gang feud. A buck knife pierced his chest, a deadly blow puncturing his heart. What was the motive behind this heinous act? It was believed to be rooted in the violation of the sacred tenets of the 5% Nation. Little did he know that his association with the 5% Nation, a secretive and influential black nationalist movement, would ultimately seal his fate. As the echoes of the stabbing reverberated through Sing Sing, the investigators were determined to bring the perpetrators to light. But at the time, they could learn nothing, as the rest of the inmates maintained a strict code of silence, and due to this, eventually, the case went cold. Years turned into decades, and the case of Michael Jones's murder seemed destined to languish in the annals of unsolved crimes. But in 2023, after 27 years, a renewed wave of determination breathed life into the dormant investigation. State police investigators, in tandem with the resolute Westchester District Attorney's Office, embarked on a journey that would span the nation, conducting interviews and unearthing long-buried evidence. Their relentless pursuit would lead them down a path they never anticipated, exposing the tangled web of the 5% Nation and its alleged involvement in the jailhouse slaying. While the exact evidence uncovered has not been released to the public, in the shadows of Sing Sing prison, two figures emerged as central to the murder of Michael Jones. Stephen Smith, a seasoned inmate with a dark history, allegedly orchestrated the fatal attack. Guided by his orders, Allah Son Allah, who was known as Gwyn Cancer in those turbulent times, became the instrument of destruction. The investigation unearthed their connection to the 5% Nation. While the exact motive behind the murder was not released, it's believed that Michael broke some of the 5% Nation's rules, which led him to being killed. Justice, albeit delayed, finally caught up with the alleged perpetrators. The wheels of law enforcement turned with precision. The long arm of the law reached out to claim Stephen Smith, now 60, and Allah Son Allah, now 53, in early June 2023. Smith had previously been convicted of another murder, but he was later paroled in 2018 and was living in North Carolina at the time of his arrest, the district attorney's office said. Allah Son Allah, who was residing in Albany at the time of his arrest, was convicted of criminal possession of a controlled substance in 1994. He was paroled in 2003, but then served another 4-year stint behind bars due to a 2015 conviction for selling drugs. After 27 years of ambiguity, some sort of resolution finally became apparent. The Westchester County District Attorney's Office was able to achieve an indictment in early June 2023 for Michael Jones's murder, thanks to the superb investigation work of the New York State Police and their own devoted cold case and homicide bureaus. A Westchester County grand jury indicted Stephen Smith for 2 counts of first-degree murder and second-degree murder, and Allah Son Allah for second-degree murder. The case was a sobering reminder of the perils present in the world of gang violence as the pieces of this terrible puzzle began to slowly come together. It served as evidence of the steadfast dedication to justice and the never-ending attempts to comfort the distraught families left in the aftermath of such terrible atrocities.